across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you to Alex. Back tomorrow right here at the home of Common Sense. This is Talk. There's a lot to get through this afternoon. Keir Starmer under pressure over what he knew and when about Peter Mandelson's links to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein before appointing him as UK ambassador to the US. This is just part of a long line of blunders from Keir Starmer. Serious question. How long can he last as Prime Minister? We'll open up the lines on that one now. Also this afternoon, the suspect in the killing of right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk remains on the run, with the FBI releasing a video of, quote, a person of interest running off the rooftop. It comes as Trump's officials vow to crack down on people who celebrate the shooting. There's been some horrific examples of that, not just over there, but over here as well. And former Prime Minister Theresa May has slammed the assisted dying bill as a licence to kill, warning it risks pressurising the vulnerable as around 190 peers debate the controversial legislation in the House of Lords. It's got to that stage. Details on all of that, and of course, naturally, we bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk. The number you need, if you want to leave a voice note here as well, this is the easiest way to do it, 0344 499 1000. You can message 87222. How long can Starmer hang on for? Look, unlike many other leaders, Starmer never did enter office with a big idea. There was none of that kind of great reset or the David Cameron big society moments. Back in the 60s in the States, Lyndon Johnson went for the Great Society. John Major wanted back to basics. That went well, didn't it? And back over the pond, Roosevelt had his New Deal. I guess the most famous example of these kind of catch-all catchphrases is, of course, Donald Trump's genius, whether you like him or not. Make America great again. Simple as that. Starmer didn't have any of those. But you know what? If he did, he would have simply said, oh, we're not the Tories. And that's really where the problems began. We're not the Tories. That in itself is your big idea, really? Blair at least put the word new in front of the word Labour and copped the mother of all landslides. Starmer, however, was clueless, had nothing, no inner core of political purpose or burning furnace of ambition. There was no ideology other than that his party were not the Conservatives. That was it. It fell apart rather quickly, of course. For Starmer, there was no honeymoon period from fuel, winter fuel, to farmers. This was clearly a man with no idea, and it's gone downhill ever since, for goodness sake. This has not been a great time for Keir Starmer. And of course, today we know that he's facing questions over his appointment of Peter Mandelson as the UK's ambassador to the USA, after he was sacked, of course, over those links to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. So Keir fired Mandelson after reviewing emails that showed the Labour peer sent supportive messages to Epstein, even as he faced charges for sex offences back in 2008. I mean, it's grim, it's dark, it's as murky as it gets in terms of where Mandelson was. But you know what? It ain't much better for the Prime Minister either. You know, being the Prime Minister, I don't dispute, it's a big old job. I would imagine you don't sleep very much, and it's 24/7. It's full on. That's why you take the gig. You know what it's going to do. So all of that is happening. But of course, the one thing that you really seriously hope with anyone coming into high office is that they have a natural antenna, a kind of gut instinct. The fact that you would want that job as a Prime Minister would usually suggest that you kind of spot stuff, you know your way around a dilemma, you're kind of on it, you're sort of on it. There's no flies on you. You might not speak everyone's political language, but you're across it. You kind of spot, when you see it, you know it, and when you know it, you call it out. That's sort of what you think a Prime Minister would be, the nuts and bolts, the inner scaffolding as their thought processes, you think would be something like that. So somebody comes along and says, right, you want Peter Mandelson as the ambassador? Yeah, well, we've got to tell you, Prime Minister, there's a couple of iffy bits here. You know, it looks like he might have continued his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein even after Mr. Epstein was in jail, even when they were aware of what was... He could have carried on. I don't care. I want him anyway. I want that one. Is that what was going on? These are the questions he's got to answer. And, of course, firing Mandelson, whilst he's not a cabinet minister, it's a very high-profile position, particularly since, in this instance, normally you wouldn't be able to name the American ambassador, but the fact that it was Peter Mandelson, with a long political history in this country, former cabinet minister on more than one occasion, of course, the fact that it was him sort of took on a whole new resonance in terms of the profile of that position. So he fired Mandelson. Of course, last week he fired Angela Rayner, yes, the housing minister, who dodged a housing tax. Say that again, a housing minister who dodged a housing tax. Really? Well, that doesn't happen very often. But, well, there was the homeless minister who made some people homeless. Get out of it. Really? Yeah, did you not hear about that? Rushanara Ali, homeless minister, kicked out her tenants, then put the rent up, got some more tenants. Oh, yeah, there was another one as well, wasn't there? Yeah. I mean, what about having an anti-corruption minister that is now currently embroiled in a massive corruption issue? By the way, she pleads not guilty to any of this stuff. Tulip Siddiq, Minister of State for Anti-Corruption, resigned due to family ties to her aunt, who's a former Bangladeshi Prime Minister, by the way, accused of a massive case of corruption. Some say she's up to her neck in it, even if she's not guilty. Who wants to go through? So hang on. So he's lost the corruption minister. The anti-corruption minister has gone because she's embroiled in corruption. The homeless minister has gone because she made people homeless. And the housing minister has gone because she dodged a housing tax. Wow. Oh, and then there was Andrew Gwynn as well. Let's not forget Andrew Gwynn. That's a name you're never going to ever remember. If it came up in a pub quiz, you'd be clueless like the rest of us. Sacked and suspended by the party after sending WhatsApp messages containing racist and sexist comments about colleagues, including Angela Rayner and Diane Abbott. He also made some offensive remarks about constituents as well, something about wanting them dead, as I remember. Goodness me. So it wasn't really a great start. Louise Hay, of course, she was the former transport minister. When it came out, she'd pleaded guilty to a fraud offence back in 2013. And all of this has happened in just shy of a year. Just shy of a year. And these are not, you know, a couple of nameless backbenchers, as Alex was saying. These are quite sort of high-profile characters, right front bench in his government. And then this week, less than a week later, after he had to fire Angela Rayner, he's had to fire the American ambassador, the ambassador to America, Peter Mandelson. I have to ask the question, by the way, how long can Keir Starmer last? How long can Keir Starmer last? 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about this and a few other big stories. Just before we do, a bit of breaking news. Donald Trump has told Fox News that US authorities believe with a high degree of certainty that the Utah shooter is now in custody. That's just broken, that Mr. Trump has told Fox News that US authorities believe with a high degree of certainty that the Utah shooter is in custody. Details as it emerges. Let's get a word on all of the big stories of the day. Liam Deacon is back with us, comms consultant and former head of press at the Brexit Party. Afternoon to you, Liam. Good to have you with us again. Let's start then with the Starmer-Mandelson mess-up, which follows, of course, a long line of previous mess-ups from Starmer. Sources claim that there were security concerns surrounding Mandelson before he was hired by Number 10. Let's have a listen to Keir Starmer, of course, and remember what he said just before he decided to sack him. Here he is.
The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
16 hours and 45 minutes later, Liam, he fired him. I wonder what happened between then and then.
It's absolutely extraordinary. I rewatched that PMQs just before this, and you can tell he's on shaky ground. He's trying his best to defend the indefensible, but he goes out and he does it. And what it reminded me of is, do you remember the Chris Pincher scandal that eventually brought Boris down? And it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. And one of the things about it in particular was that Boris Johnson had sent some of his ministers out to defend Chris Pincher when actually he knew things already about Chris Pincher that were about to become public and were about to bring him down. And ministers all sort of lined up and said, we cannot work with this man Boris Johnson anymore. He just cannot help but lie, and he keeps trying to defend the indefensible. And I just saw a complete echo of this in precisely what Sir Keir Starmer did yesterday. It was so like the Chris Pincher episode, where he was defending it when it was so obviously indefensible, and he was sending ministers out to bat for a position that was so obviously about to collapse because he knew something that this poor minister didn't know. And it just reminds me, you make exactly the right point, that Keir Starmer's entire rise to power was based on not being Boris Johnson, that these grubby, tax dodging, chaotic Tories, and it was, we are the grown-ups in the room. There's that famous clip of Andrew Marr when he was like, "Oh, thank goodness we've got late. We're going to be the one sensible, stable nation in the Western world, and investment's going to flow in." And everything that's happened since then, you list them perfectly. The homeless minister making people homeless, allegedly. The corruption minister on trial for corruption in Bangladesh also denies it. And they're almost sort of ratcheting up, aren't they? So you sort of started with the Sue Gray scandal and the free glasses from Lord Ali and all of this, and you might have shrugged your shoulders and said, well, they're new to government, they need some nice new suits. And then you could have said, oh, well, some of these ministers are quite junior and they're fresh-faced. And now you're getting right to the very top here. And actually, none of this about Lord Mandelson is new. Lord Mandelson has been famously sacked, I think, 4 times from either ministerial or government jobs. He was allegedly embroiled in something to do with dodgy loans back in the Blair days. He allegedly helped get a billionaire a passport and had to stand in front of Number 10 and resign. So Lord Mandelson has long history in front of some of these things. And, what changed? Because one day we were reading that 10-page letter when he was talking about those beautiful friends at Jeffrey Epstein's house. And I quote exactly, yum, yum, which is stomach-churning and disgusting when we now know what was happening at those mansions. And he said all these interesting friends. Then Lord Mandelson went to speak to Harry Cole, formerly of this parish. Harry did another great bit of journalism poking on this, and he said, I fell for his lies. And then just another day, we get these extra letters when he's talking really grotesquely about basically fighting the allegations. He says, we need to see them off. We need to fight back. We need to strategize. Remember the art of war. I mean, firstly and foremost, these letters are they're so gauche and dripping with sort of, he's so sucking up to Epstein. You just wonder. It's so embarrassing that all of this has been leaked. 10 pages. Who writes a 10-page birthday letter to let alone to an international paedophile? And you just think, like, what was in that letter that was so much worse than the previous?
Than the previous ones. I mean, I suppose the question here that we're throwing out, Liam, is how long... can Keir Starmer hang on here? Because, as you rightly said, I mean, there was the Chris Pincher affair with Boris Johnson. That, and I suppose, throw in a few Colin the Caterpillar cake parties, and he was done for. But PMs do have a habit, even in the face of adversity and all sorts of carnage going on around them, they have a habit of hanging on.
I mean, so I had this conversation with some people in Reform quite recently, because there is a theory kicking around that they're going to get, people in Reform are saying this quite openly, they're going to try and get ready for a general election in about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, because they think Starmer will come down. It's difficult to see how, though. He does have a massive thumping majority. And a lot of those MPs, the Starmerites, were elected, because remember, Starmer sort of cleansed the Corbynites, got all his own people into the seats, and he got them all in power. And these MPs will know they're one-term MPs. You know, as we said at the beginning, people didn't vote for Labour. They just voted for the next thing. They just voted for change. They just wanted something different. And plausibly, Starmer and his Starmerites were the only people that could form a government. And those MPs will know it. They're only there because he got this big majority and they owe it to him. And I can't see them rebelling. It's only really those Labour MPs that can get him out. Well, and the flip side of that, though, is actually Starmer is struggling to get through major bits of legislation. We've seen this with the welfare thing. We've got a welfare bill spiralling out of control, and twice he's tried to drive home cuts to PIP and cuts to SEN spending in schools, and he hasn't been able to do it. So I guess the plausible way is that actually the government begins to run out of money. You know,
maybe it is as simple as that. It will be the running out of cash and going cap in hand elsewhere that perhaps tips him over the edge. We'll wait and see. Let's just move to this story briefly on this one, if we can, Liam. David Lammy has been accused of fueling violent rhetoric against right-wing figures. This follows the death, of course, of Charlie Kirk. Let's have a listen to Nigel Farage in Parliament yesterday, speaking about Charlie Kirk and that all-important issue of free speech.
He'd attracted the following of many millions of young Americans and indeed had a growing online presence in our country, especially after he spoke at the Oxford Union last month. I absolutely believe in free speech, but we all understand there are limits to free speech. Incitement, constant personal vilification, the use of horrendous historical images. And this is not a left-right issue. It's not a left-right debate. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, whichever side of the divide we're on, however passionately we feel, to behave with personal responsibility. And I mourn the loss of my friend.
Nigel Farage speaking yesterday. Response briefly on this, Liam, in terms of, you know, what this means. We know, and I was looking at some of the horrendous examples of people, you know, quite literally celebrating, singing, dancing over the, you know, the fact that two children have just lost their father in a violent, very public murder seen by the world, and people find it suitable and appropriate to celebrate that based on nothing more than they disagree with someone. I mean, we live in horrific times.
It's grotesque, isn't it? And beautifully said by Nigel. One thing I will say is the last thing that Charlie Kirk would have wanted his death to be used for is to campaign for more censorship, okay? He is a man who built his career defending free speech, okay? And I think that a lot of these people are ridiculous, grotesque, and should be criticised. But let's not let this conversation stray into sort of when people start saying, your words lead to violence and people must be restrained in what they can say. No, people can say ridiculous things and idiotic things, and we just got to remember that free speech is fundamentally what Charlie believed in. But what do right-wingers want, therefore, if they don't want more censorship? I'll tell you what we want. We just want some type of equality when it comes to these kinds of things. I'm someone that's worked personally and in close proximity with Nigel Farage, particularly in the 2019 general election. And I can tell you the amount of hate and abuse that we got. We had Extinction Rebellion blocking our office and taking it over. And the police did not take it seriously. They just let those protesters lay there. And you just think if those roles were reversed, if right-wing protesters were throwing themselves into the offices of left-wing parties, the police would remove them straight away. So I think it's quite simple. Okay, we don't want more censorship. We don't want more cracking down on speech. We just want the abuse of right-wing political activists to be taken as seriously as the abuse of left-wing activists. It's as simple as that. But the one thing that Charlie Kirk would not have wanted is more calls for censorship. Yeah,
I mean, that's a really good point. It's a fundamental point to this discussion as well. And I guess that then gets into the question of, well, where is the line? Is there a line at all? We're going to talk to Liam Moore in just a second. Liam Deacon is former head of press with the Brexit Party, worked on some pretty fundamental elements of their journey as to where they are now. Lots to discuss with you. We're asking that question, how long can Keir Starmer last? I mean, very simply, how long? 0344 499 1000.
Peter Mandelson was His Majesty's ambassador, His Majesty's envoy. Trump was thinking of it more as the royals rather than a kind of political appointment and kind of Westminster politics. So I think he's pretty unhappy at how domestic political opinion and Labour Party internal pressures have forced the removal of someone he quite liked. So I think that that's put a downer on it. And of course, every time we've had one of these visits, Alex, we think the whole question is, will the kind of Trump-Starmer relationship blow up? We've had a couple now. I think it's taken the sting out of it. But right now, it seems that there could potentially be some flare-up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one comes from Kaz in Bedford. It says, do we really have to endure this appalling government for another 4 years when their credibility is completely shot? If Nigel can suggest that an election could be in 2027, why not now? Reform may not quite be oven ready, but there's no safe hands in the Labour Party. Must we wait until the damage is irreversible? I always thought the monarchy was there to intervene in the event of a totally mad government. Is the king just indifferent to this dangerous incompetence? How bad does it have to get? I mean, that last point is brilliant. How bad does it have to get? How long can Keir Starmer hang on for? 0344 499 1000. 24 minutes after 1. We're delighted that Liam Deacon is still with us, former head of press at the Brexit Party. Let's move to this one. Liam, the bad news keeps on coming for the government. Waiting lists have hit 7.4 million on the NHS, rising for the second month in a row. Let's have a listen once again to another lie. This came before Labour got into power. It's a beauty.
Let me make this guarantee because it is one of our first steps that we will carry out if we get into government. So that means day one, sleeves rolled out. And that is our plan for 40,000 extra appointments each and every week to get the waiting list down. That will be 2 million off the waiting list. And I've just been talking to people who've been on the waiting list. One man's just had his hip replaced. He's been waiting 2 years. Make a massive difference to him if we're able to implement our plan. It's a first step, but it's a very, very important first step.
Yeah, and it's one you haven't yet taken. Good Lord, Liam. I mean, it just keeps on coming, doesn't it?
This is actually a real problem for Labour because they have very few things that they can fall back on here. And rightly or wrongly, polling consistently shows that when people are worried about the NHS and their health more generally, it pushes them towards voting Labour. It's sort of a reflexive thing that's borne out in the data. And if they and I think that is one of the things that will cause the polls to tighten in a few years as we get closer to a general election. Is people if the NHS is driven up the agenda, that will help Labour out. But if they can't even back this up with any type of meaningful improvements in the NHS and in the waiting list data, they're getting in real trouble. There's a little bit of a caveat here that these do go up and down. Winter's coming, waiting lists generally go up then. But again, as you said, he promised real significant progress on this. And whether or not it's a little blip, there still is nothing meaningful happened. So yeah, no, it's a real problem. The other big question here is Reform UK don't have a policy on the NHS right now. So they haven't got a detailed policy anyway. They brought in Anne-Marie Morris, a former Tory MP who has quite deep experience in social care and NHS, and they're working very hard to develop this. And people can criticise them for not having a policy, or they can actually say this is a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity to come up with something creative, something that's going to break the status quo. You've seen Tories fail, and you've seen the Labour now failing on the NHS. So can Reform step up, come up with a policy that's going to convince people that the NHS is going to be safe in their hands? Watch that space.
I think it needs to be a big one for Reform this as well. This need flags, bells, whistles, the entire lot, to announce something where the country almost stops in its tracks and goes, wow, This is a big idea. We will come back to it, I'm sure, many more times on that one. I also want to get a word from you on this one as well, Liam. Theresa May leading the charge against assisted dying in the House of Lords today as the debate on the private members bill kicks off. 190 peers are set to speak, including ex-ministers, bishops and a former Supreme Court president. Around 90 currently opposing the bill, while 50 support it. Let's have a listen to Baroness May.
First, I do not believe that the safeguards in this bill will prevent people from being pressurised to end their lives, sometimes for the benefit of others. I also worry that, as we have seen in countries where there is such a law, that people will feel that they must end their lives simply because they feel they are a burden on others. I worry about the impact it will have on people with disabilities, with chronic illness, with mental health problems, because there is a risk that legalising assisted dying reinforces the dangerous notion that some lives are less worth living than others.
Theresa May speaking earlier in the House of Lords. Liam, your take on what you heard the former Prime Minister say?
Didn't think I'd be here this morning agreeing with Theresa May, having spent a large part of my career trying to bring her down as PM and stop her ruining Brexit. Yeah. But I mean, no, that is well said, and it's a very important thing for her to say. But it's also worth flagging. It's not just Theresa May in the House of Lords. You've got everyone from Claire Fox to Tories and to Lib Dems that are opposing this. It's really interesting what's happening today. So it's a private members bill, which means it can only be debated on Fridays. If they don't clear these debates in time for the end of the Parliament, it will fall unless the government picks it up and picks it up as a government piece of legislation. That's very unlikely to happen because so many people within Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet, David Lammy being one of them, Shabana Mahmood being another, have said they're opposed to it. So these 2 Fridays, today and next Friday, are absolutely critical in getting this bit of law through Parliament. And Toby Young, Lord Young, made some interesting points about that. Has been a bit of chicanery, a bit of dirty tricks by its proponents to try and stop people speaking. It's really critical, though, that because even if you agree with this law, and I don't, the checks and balances are key. And key proponents have said, even though I agree with assisted dying in principle, the safety checks are not there. The Royal College of Physicians have highlighted that there's no proper way of recording these deaths. The safeguards are non-binding and these kind of things. So we need safeguards because what Theresa May intimates there is there's been horrific examples in places like Canada where people have been allowed to kill themselves effectively because they're lonely, which is shocking. Yeah. That should never be able to happen. We need strong checks and balances. Personally, I think it's right that the Lords scrutinises this, and this is precisely what the Lords are there to do. And if they block this law, I think they've done a good job because it's clearly not robust enough, even though the House of Commons have voted for it.
Great work, Liam. Thank you very much indeed. Have a cracking weekend. We will speak again soon. He is Liam Deacon, former head of press for the Brexit Party. Thank you to him. Over to you. We're going to talk to Giles Dilnot in just a second on this very point of how long can Starmer hang on. Giles, editor of Conservative Home, with us in a moment. 0344 499 1000. Leave a voice note there as well if you want to bypass the queues, or we can have a chat on the same number, or you can send a message 87222. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mike says, don't forget Rachel Reeves and her CV. And of course there was Jonathan Reynolds, wasn't it, who was, meant to be essentially a solicitor. And wasn't. There's a few others in there as well. I think what marks it out a bit, really, in terms of this government, is that it's all in a very short period of time. This is within a year, most of this stuff kind of happened, whether it was Rayner, Andrew Gwynn, Louise Hay, the revelations came out, Roshanara Ali, Tulip Sadiq, Peter Mandelson, farmers, winter fuel. I mean, bloody Nora, as they might say. The list goes on. How long can Starmer hang on for is the question here. And there's so much within this story, of course, that leads us to where we are today. And that is the pressure that is growing around Keir Starmer over what he knew about Peter Mandelson's ties to the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein before appointing him as the UK ambassador to the United States. Mandelson, of course, was sacked after a letter surfaced calling Epstein his best pal and admitting their friendship lasted far too long, way after they already knew what this guy was up to. Sources say there were security concerns about Mandelson before Number 10 hired him for the role. Let's have a listen again to Keir Starmer speaking in PMQs just, less than a day before he sacked him.
The ambassador has repeatedly expressed his deep regret for his association with him. He's right to do so. I have confidence in him, and he's playing an important role in the UK-US relationship.
Yes, so important that he made him walk the plank the very next day. Giles Dillot is the editor at Conservative Home. Giles, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Good. Finally, we have you in the parlour of verbal delight. Great to see you again. Indeed, yeah, only took a year. Roughly about the same length of time that Keir Starmer has been in the job, of course. And, we all know there was no honeymoon period, was there, really, for Starmer? And I said at the beginning of the programme, whereas lots of governments come in with, David Cameron's, was it Big Society? Whether it works or not is another issue, but there was a sort of philosophical underpinning. The best one ever, I think, is always going to be Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, whether you like the man or not. It was a very simple, hugely effective mantra. There was nothing with Keir Starmer, and if there had been something, all it would have said is, we're not the Tories.
And here's the funny thing, Ian. Let's just go back to before the election, because there are two things that are relevant here. First of all, we kept accusing him, and look, I mean, I was in the government that they kicked out, the electorate kicked out in 2024. I was working as a special advisor in that government. I knew we weren't going to win. 14 years, it was inevitable, and we were making mistakes, or we were just not getting to deliver the things that we said we had said we would deliver. But we knew, because we were getting flack from Labour all the time, that they hadn't got any solutions. They may have identified the problems, but we knew they hadn't got any solutions. Now, nobody was listening to us. I don't think I particularly... I mean, I completely understand that, so we weren't getting any traction. If you go back and look at it, it's like we did say they don't have a plan. Yeah. And it turns out they really didn't have a plan. They weren't ready for government. The other thing they did was they came to the electorate and said, these guys are sleazeballs. You know that, and we promise solemnly, because we're the good guys, we're going to be so much better. So they get in, and they get a whopping majority. There's a very thin majority, but they get a whopping majority. And somebody asked me, after they'd been in for a few months, and a lot of this stuff had come out, the Lord Ali suits, the flat lending, the dresses to the missus, and some of this stuff was starting to trickle through. I think we might have had Louise Hay admitting the fraud charge or whatever. And I said, it doesn't matter. It's not the frocks, it's not the suits, it's not the glasses, it's not the phones. It's hypocrisy that kills you. And so many people have said to us, 14 years, you had 14 years, 14 months to look worse than we did. Yeah. That extraordinary record. And I said to somebody, asked me before Christmas last year on a programme, what are your predictions? who's in trouble next year? And I said, Keir Starmer is absolutely in trouble. And they looked at me as slightly oddly, as if, that's not the way the story goes. The story goes, okay, if you had a bad fumbling start, you get a reset and you get yourself to grips and you understand the job and it starts to get better. And I said, no, it's not going to happen, because he fundamentally doesn't have what it takes to turn this around.
Yeah, and it's
he's not up to the job.
Indeed, and the stuff that has happened, I mean, you couldn't put it in an episode of House of Cards.
No, they wouldn't believe you.
And I look at this list as well, Giles, and I'm going to read this again. I know I'm not the first person to do this, but it's too delicious to not repeat again. You lose an anti-corruption minister because she's embroiled in a huge corruption scandal. You lose a homelessness minister because she made some people homeless, and you lose a housing minister because she dodged a housing tax. I mean, really?
It's extraordinary. It's almost like they've gone out of their way to choose the worst possible option of dealing with or their own lives or handling their job in government. And, this is the bit. I'm the editor of Conservative Home. Of course I take a conservative point of view. Of course I'm looking at and analysing, it's my job, the opposition to a Labour government.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I could put the rosette aside for a moment and just go, on any scale, on any objective scale, that is incompetence and just weirdness in government that I've never seen before.
I know. I'm just waiting to hear that Shabana Mahmood was part of the Cratwing gang or something. There's going to be something weird and bizarre come up. But I guess. Sorry, Giles, do continue.
Ian, there's something else I wanted to share with you and your listeners as well, is that I sort of got two hats. Well, I don't anymore. I am the editor of Conservative Home, but I used to work for James Cleverly in government and was in the Foreign Office. And the Mandelson thing just is really, really odd, because I can't see quite what Downing Street knew on Wednesday evening that they didn't and couldn't have known when he went into PMQs and Starmer said, I've got full confidence in him. It's just not possible. And my former boss did a tweet last night explaining why, if you make a political appointee like Peter Mandelson was, the system is, one, it tends to be on the side of civil servants and career diplomats getting the job, and there are good reasons why they should in many cases. This is a job that has some excellent candidates that would be hoping they would be chosen. But also, that is their job to point out, here is the problem, Minister, with your decision to make a political appointee. And I have no doubt at the very basic level, they would have said, this is a man who has had to leave government twice before. I suspect they would have pointed out more things as well. Due diligence and a process that involves independence, as Starmer talks about. What they mean there is vetting.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that some of these issues, which were known about and some in the public domain, were not picked up by vetting is extraordinary. The further thing is that to be the ambassador to the United States from Britain, which is a Five Eyes country, that arguably our biggest and closest and most secure relationship, you would have to have pretty high clearance, higher than I had, and mine was high enough. How people don't know about that, how that information isn't then passed back and go, here is a writ. To me, that is inconceivable of the processes I know operate in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, where I worked for over a year.
And that I was thinking about this because a mutual friend of ours who worked in Downing Street, you'll know who I'm talking about.
I do.
I mean, when he went through the security thing, I remember it was never ending. It went on for months, and all manner of people were spoken to that he'd known back in the... goodness me. And you just described a very similar thing.
I still find people, Ian, who go, oh, you do know I got called 2 years ago. They're thorough.
Yeah.
They're thorough. And the point about this, and this is the interesting thing, the point about those vetting things is obviously to ascertain whether you have the capability to keep a secret. And what they're really checking is whether you'll lie. So they know already a lot about you, and they were asking questions they already know the answer to. They just want to know how you're going to answer it. Yeah. So it's just inconceivable to me that there weren't things raised to say, you're taking a risk, you can still take this risk. And the part of the problem with Mandelson, of course, is he's partly brilliant and partly risky. He's always been like that.
Yeah.
You'll find the cabinet secretary back in the days of Blair retrospectively described Peter Mandelson as the most able minister he'd ever come across in government.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly prepared to believe that's true. The trouble is that's the attraction to hiring him, and then there's this other stuff.
Exactly. Well, do you know what? I was reminded of this, Giles. There's that clip of Mandelson in the Oval Office when I think the trade deal was done, and he shakes hand with the president, and Trump turns around and says, "Well, you've got a great accent. You know, you speak. I want to talk like him." And I wonder whether Starmer was just so seduced by the idea that, bearing in mind, I don't for one second think that Trump looks at Starmer and thinks, oh, he's really good, this guy. He kind of tolerates him and he puts on a facade that, you know, they're good mates. He talks a tough deal and stuff. But I think Starmer thought, Mandelson is just the person I need because he'll be very loyal to Trump. He'll be very diplomatic. Trump will like Mandelson. And as we know, there's a bit of commonality there, which we didn't previously.
Which might not have wanted raised.
Indeed. But I just genuinely sense that it was... Starmer might have known about a bit of this, but thought... He's willing to forego that in exchange for the fact that this is the man that will get the best relationship with Trump.
I am going to show my political geekery here, and also there are dangers of making comparisons to real life and this. But one of the great series is The West Wing on TV, and I have a feeling they sort of see Mandelson as like Lord John Marbury, the guy that goes into.
It's probably exactly that.
I think it is. It's that kind of. He is so quintessentially English, even though it's a bit of a performance. Mandelson is extremely well connected. He comes from a sort of political aristocracy, even though it's not aristocracy. And he knows a lot of very important people and can hold his own. And like I said, you know, people genuinely saw him, independent people, civil service people, when they worked with him, as a brilliant operative. The problem is he just comes with this baggage.
Yeah.
And at what point do you take a risk? And this is where it comes back to Starmer. Your judgment every single time comes into question. You're not a good judge.
Indeed, and that's central to all of this, of course. And then there's all the other stuff we mentioned, and I talked about the farmer issue and the winter fuel allowance, and Boomerang Rach and her CV of doom, and Reynolds and his solicitor status, etc. There's all of that. But in terms of scandals, Giles, look, you look back at 1997 when Blair came in, that was also meant to be a sort of clean sweep, and obviously the major government had been embroiled in all sorts, and some of them had either been in jail or were waiting to go to jail, goodness knows what else. So Blair comes in and you think, how long is it going to take? I think I remember the Bernie Ecclestone affair, and there was somebody else caught with their trousers down on Clapham Common. So there's always a scandal that comes at some point.
But there's a really interesting thing about handling, and this is why Starmer is no Blair. And, I think it's unworthy of Conservatives not to recognise that whether you agreed with a single thing he did, and I can criticise lots of things that he did, that Blair did feel like someone who walked the walk and talked the talk of being a Prime Minister. And Starmer is not that man. Yeah. And here's why. The first scandal that hits Tony Blair in this, by the way, I think it's in the autumn of 97, his approval rating is like in, Soviet election figures.
Correct.
It's in the 80s or something. It's off the charts. And he has this scandal, and he gives an interview to Robin Oakley, who is the then BBC political editor. The usual chairs, two cameras, it's a crisis kind of thing. And he looks at Robin Oakley and he goes, I think people understand that I am a pretty straightforward kind of guy, and we've made a mistake. And he just owned it and said sorry.
Yeah.
Right? First thing that happens to Starmer, he obfuscates, he seems to give the impression that it's not nearly as bad. If you're trying to pin this as like stuff the Tories did, well, it isn't. And I thought, you're misjudging this. You're tin-eared about this. I wouldn't do that. I'd go, do you know what? It was a mistake. Shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
You might have had a bit more of hearing just coming in. And that is the difference between them, that he's not a communicator. He doesn't find it easy to say, sorry, he made a mistake, which is a problem when you're making this many mistakes this quickly.
Final question, Charles. We'll have to be brief on this if we can, but will Starmer hang on till 2029?
I don't think he will, no. That's been my prediction for a while. I don't think he will. I think, and also the trouble is the blame circle's getting closer and closer to him. I think they will try and move on him. Although, having said that, very briefly, Labour Party, its constitution and it's the way it works, it's quite difficult to get rid of a sitting leader.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Giles, thank you very much indeed. Full house points, by the way, for the Tony Blair impression. Wasn't expecting that. That was a beauty. He is Giles Dilnot, editor at Conservative Home, former senior government advisor as well. Thoughts on that? How long can Keir Starmer last? 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. This is Talk.
I think it is very, very unlikely that anyone would have prevented the Prime Minister seeing that security information, which we're now being told contained information about Mandelson's ongoing relationship with Epstein. And that's to say that the Prime Minister actually knew about this all along. Yeah. And I think that casts major doubt over his judgment, and he has enormously serious questions to answer. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to push the government to publish that information, put it on the public record so we can all see who knew what when.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
To your calls in just a second. Let me just reiterate that news we broke around about 20 minutes ago. US President Donald Trump says with a high degree of certainty that the suspect in the Charlie Kirk killing has been caught, with someone close to the suspect helping to turn him in. Here's what Mr. Trump told Fox News.
Any updates on the suspect?
Yeah. Can I always say, I think, just to protect us all, and so Fox doesn't get sued, and we all don't get sued, and everything else. But I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody, everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
We'll get the latest on that. We're expecting a press conference at about 2 o'clock our time, so we'll bring you details of that as well. Over to your calls. Can Keir Starmer last? And if so, for how long? Gaynor is in Leicestershire. What do you think, Gaynor? Afternoon to you.
Oh, afternoon, Mike. Thanks for a great show. He's an absolute grade A muppet. How he can get up in the morning and hold his head up high and say as the Prime Minister of this once great country is beyond me. And all his front benchers have been to the Keir School of Presentation Skills because they stand there with their arms across their bellies, smiling through gritted teeth while they're all eyes. It's an embarrassment, and he needs to go sooner.
There it is, simple, short and sweet. Gaynor, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. It's interesting. I can't think of a time when... I know Boris Johnson, the left hated Boris Johnson, mostly over Brexit and a few other things. But I can't really sense a time where somebody has tangibly felt, a leader has tangibly felt so unpopular as this one. Carl's in Liverpool. What do you got for us, Carl? Good afternoon to you. I mean, this is true Labour land, Liverpool. Where does Starmer fit into that picture?
Good afternoon, Ian. Well, I can tell you now from my point of view and quite a lot of my friends, one of them is a Labour councillor. He's disgusted in everything that's going on.
Wow.
He's a dead man walking in my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Everything falls at his doorstep, everything that's happened. And I said before, if we don't see an implosion from Labour and they attack each other and they go against him, then we'll see him. He has to go at some point, and the sooner the better. But what we have to worry about is who we get in. You know, this Charlie Kirk incident, it's shocking, and it sends such waves across the whole of Europe, and young people that followed him. I followed him. He's a fantastic speaker. And to be killed in the way for words, just for words, and having debates, and you know. And it does,
as I kept saying yesterday, and clearly I'm not the only one saying this, but I mean, it doesn't matter whether you disagreed with everything he said, or whether you agreed with everything he said. That was his whole point. It doesn't, you know, we shouldn't be killing people and try to assassinate those who have a differing view.
Of course, that's debate. That. You know, he said something. I watched the video, and he said something to a lady who was asking what he was doing at a university. He said, "Well, when we can't talk, that's when wars happen."
Correct. Yes, he did.
Talk, that's when we have civil wars.
Yeah.
And you know, we've got this thing on tomorrow, the Tommy Robinson thing. God help us, Ian. God help us if anything happens there, because we are so close to the British people have had enough. I mean, and it's. Keir Starmer is at the head of it all. If he's not gone by the end of the year, I'll be surprised. We cannot take more of this. It's one misstep, one blunder, one sacking, one resignation after another. Months of it, absolute months of scandal, and it's enough to finish anyone off.
And it's the hypocrisy bit, isn't it? It's not the specifics. Anyone can muck up a CV in their bar. It's the idea that they came in to say, we're not the Tories, we do things very differently. Country first, party second, all this claptrap.
It is, Ian. Well, look, Miliband's still running a gas boiler.
Miliband's still got a gas boiler, and not all of them have an electric car either. Brilliant. Listen, Carl, I've got to run. You've been brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Carl in Liverpool. David is in Exeter. What do you got for us, David? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. I'm just going to follow on from what we said yesterday about, you know, whoever Mandelson's handlers and controllers are must be geniuses, and this was like something out of the original Peter Sellers and David Niven Bond, Casino Royale, the comedy version.
Yes.
So what I'm going to say, because obviously a lot's happened since we spoke yesterday, and all this is now starting to come out. Who knew? Really what we're looking at, Ian, I think, is some kind of botched schoolboy attempt at running and conducting intelligence. And this is in the context of critical situation of war all over the world now and escalating. That you know, and this isn't the first time Labour have done this. They did it in Iraq with the WMD.
Yep.
And we're now seeing it again. And what we've got to do really is we've got to push past the political bods and get to the people who are holding the office, like Jonathan Powell and Lord Hermer, who sit on the National Security Council, and say to them, because obviously Powell is refusing to go before Parliament and answer questions in the Select Committee, So this is exactly the sort of thing MPs have got to get off their backsides on the benches and say, what on earth do you think you're doing? Yeah. Because honestly, this is pathetic.
It's more than pathetic as well, isn't it? It's kind of, if it was just pathetic and laughable, we could say, OK, so what? We just think it's a bit weird. But this is our government, of course. This is the people running the place.
It is, and this, as I said, and it couldn't be a more critical time. This is in the context of, war in Europe.
Yeah, yeah. War in Europe, all manner of other issues going on in terms of economics.
Yeah, they thought they would ignore the intelligence advice, put Mandelson in there and conduct some sort of, let him be Bond. It'll be a laugh. It'll be so funny.
I honestly think Starmer thought, you know what can go wrong? It's Peter. He'll be fine. The Americans will absolutely love him. Trump will love him. It'll be great. And, all the other stuff will just quietly disappear. And then, of course, it's blown up within about half an hour of him being the ambassador, for goodness sake. David, thank you for that. David in Exeter. We're asking that question, how long can Starmer last? Stephen Cambridge says, we play bingo at home with resignation. I have Lammy next for a full house. I love the idea of the all-new parlour game, playing parliamentary bingo. Lammy could, what's going to happen with Lammy? Will he just get fed up at the Justice Department, having been demoted spectacularly from Foreign Secretary? More on that. Sean in Bridlington, the best health policy for reform would be a referendum on the NHS, change to a part insurance model like France or Australia, and stick with the current model. It's the only way anyone can fix the useless NHS. Sean, thank you for that. More from you. That press conference from America on Charlie Kirk coming up as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome back. There's so much to get through here this afternoon. Donald Trump says, and you heard it there during the news and before, that with a high degree of confidence, of certainty, they have the suspects in the Charlie Kirk killing, adding that he hopes the 28 or 29-year-old person of interest is found guilty, and Trump says, given the death penalty. More on that, and of course we are expecting a press conference. We'll bring you all of what we learn from that as it happens. Prime Minister Keir Starmer under pressure over what he knew and when about Peter Mandelson's links to convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein before appointing him as UK ambassador to the US. It's getting murkier and murkier. What does it mean for Keir Starmer and his judgment, for goodness sake? It follows a long line of high-profile sackings from the Labour front bench as recently as just a week ago, when Angela Rayner, his deputy, lost the job. And the government is being accused of trying to solve the migrant hotels crisis by the back door, with secret plans revealed to spend millions of pounds housing illegal migrants in student flats, leaving local residents with absolutely no say. They really haven't got a clue, this lot, have they? We'll have details on that as well. Everything you need to know. We'll bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Lots of mixed messages. When I say mixed messages, I mean of different types of subjects we're talking about. Reform and their health policy. It was mentioned earlier that that might be one of the big announcements coming fairly soon. It would certainly be, I think that would be quite totemic of reform. It would be a very solid announcement in one of the most high-profile and crucial areas of our system, health. And it would move them away from just being the party of discussing immigration, etc. Laura in Nottingham says David Bull may have some input into, hopefully David Bull will have some input into the reform NHS policy. He has real experience and contacts, and above all else, common sense. I've got a feeling there was, I was with David, funnily enough, on Monday just gone, and we were talking about all sorts of things and never got around to talking about that. But I think he previously in the manifesto, I think wrote or certainly, well, yes, he would have been the biggest contributor, I would imagine, to the health element of what reform had to say. Thank you, Laura, for that. Well, as you've heard, US President Donald Trump says with a high degree of certainty that the suspect in Charlie Kirk's killing has been caught. He added that someone very close to the person of interest helped turn him in. Let's have a listen to what the president told Fox News.
Well, I hope he's going to be found guilty, I would imagine, and I hope he gets the death penalty. What he did, Charlie Kirk was the finest person. He didn't deserve this. He worked so hard and so well. Everybody liked him.
Well, FBI Director Kash Patel and local authorities investigating will hold a news conference in Utah imminently. And, of course, if we can bring you that live, we will do. We'll certainly bring you what is said as well. Details on the way. Let's speak to Alastair Donald, co-governor of the Battle of Ideas Festival. Alastair, good afternoon to you. I mean, it's interesting, this kind of, what has happened here with Charlie Kirk. Most people perhaps wouldn't have known who Charlie Kirk is or was until this happened. But that didn't matter. And, of course, it doesn't matter in terms of what your politics are, because this has initiated, and I think Mr. Kirk would have been perhaps delighted to see a debate following from this, really just about the very basic, and it shouldn't even be controversial, but it sort of is now, the very basic tenets of free speech, because that's where we're at now. And some people are seeing this as a catalyst for the good. It will change things, and perhaps nutty people on the wrong part of the spectrum will suddenly realise, hang on, things have gone too far. For others, however, looking at just social media, and that's not always the best place to look for crucial and good ideas, but others think that this is a catalyst for more of the same. We need to hammer out these mad right-wingers and put them to sleep.
Yeah, well, the thing is that lots of people increasingly do know who he is, and part of that is by virtue of some of the benefits of social media, that his ideas have found a home there, because they're certainly not covered by and large in the mainstream press. So I think, we should recognise that as a benefit, and he's obviously done an incredible job in growing his audience and finding favour, I think, with his very positive attitude to debating things. You know, to go into university campuses at a time when they're basically being shut down for as institutions of debate, and to say, prove me wrong and have an open discussion, I think that's been a very positive thing over the last few years. In terms of the situation that's going on in the last couple of days since his murder, I think there's it's tricky, I think, because my instinct as someone who's very strongly defend free speech is to say we should very clearly distinguish between words and violence, and that what is said on social media and what is said, it should be free and open, and people should be allowed to say it without consequence. And legally and practically, in terms of the way that the police operate, people should be allowed to say what they want. That, however, is not to deny that we have a very tricky situation on our hands just now, because the way that discussion and debate happens these days does take an incredibly personalised form. We seem to have left the old world of politics of left and right and ideas about the future quite firmly behind, and we're now into a situation where identity forms of politics are very much dominated, and that does take a very personalised form. It very much projects the self and your fellow people within your particular identity group, whatever that is. And that then means that criticism can be taken in many instances very personally, and sometimes can be experienced quite violently. Now, that does, I think, give us something to think about. And the one thing that I worry about is that we on the free speech side, I say we, if I can count you in that, Ian, but certainly people on my side who want to defend free speech, I think we should do that. But we should be prepared to grapple and engage with some of the problems just now in terms of the way that debate takes place. And I think the tendency to indulge in the kind of celebrations that have gone on one side about his death, which are absolutely horrific and bad. But I also see people on the free speech side kind of gratuitously sharing the videos and what's going on as if to prove a point. And obviously we know about this situation by virtue of the video and the graphic nature at which it's entered into the public debate. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say it's a great thing to share. And it does seem to me to kind of add to the violent atmosphere of society just now. So defend free speech, yes, 100%, but kind of be a little bit in recognition of the kind of ethical dilemmas that some of what's been shared just now presents to us.
Yeah, and it is a wide spectrum, of course, both on left and right. There's a sort of gradient of severity in terms of where people go. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, Alistair, with the identity politics thing, the identitarian left, as they're often referred to. I think that is a really tricky area. You almost need banners out saying your identity is of no relevance to anyone or anything. But that people are forming their politics literally through their gender, the colour of their skin, their religion, their proclivities elsewhere. That's new, isn't it? I mean, when I say new, it's like in relative terms. That's a new place to be.
Yes, I think it's been growing for the last 20 years or so, and now grown into the dominant form in terms of the way that politics are discussed. And one of the problems is that when politics is shoved into this identity framework, then it immediately introduces a hierarchy. On the one hand, we have the privileged, often thought of as the white privileged, and then we have the other groups who are invariably thought to be the victims. And the victim groups are constantly told, I think, and indeed claim to some extent as well, that they are the victims of hateful speech from those in control of society. So immediately in that presentation of things, you have a situation where if you're constantly told that you're the victim of something and that words are hurtful and that you shouldn't be subject to them, then you have a problem in terms of free speech, because words get conflated with violence. Now, as I say, I'm one who constantly defends the right to use words, whatever we choose, because I think that's the, even where someone says something that I find absolutely abhorrent, I much rather know that someone thinks that and is prepared to express that view, and then at least I can take them up and have a good argument with them. But as I say, that also is not to dismiss the fact that in the current context, there is an unsavory atmosphere that's developed, especially on social media, but also more broadly in society, where, even in public events these days, people invade a space and don't let people speak. They're constantly chanting and heckling, and not from a point of view of making a point about what the person's saying, but trying to drown them out and stop them speaking at all. Yeah. And I think this is, we need to find a way to move on from this situation and reclaim the primacy of ideas, whatever those ideas may be, as matters that are worth discussing, which Indeed. Ironically is what Charlie Kirk attempted to do and did very successfully in ways, even although I actually disagreed with quite a lot of what he said. I mean, I'm organising Battle of Ideas Festival in London just now, and I would love to have had him come and speak at the festival, because I think he's someone that's up for a debate. But as much of the reason for having him speak would be because the airing of his ideas would give people in the audience a chance to dispute them and to counter them.
100%. I said yesterday, people might agree with, 80% of his ideas, and 20%, I heard him dip his toe into sort of conspiratorial waters from time to time, which I thought was a bit bonkers, and issuing faked elections and goodness knows what else. Birth control was another area I wildly disagreed with him on. So, but that's great. I mean, that was the whole point of this, isn't it? You're meant to, you're allowed to disagree, and nobody should want to kill each other because you do. I guess, Alistair, to me, the fascinating, the kernel of this argument is always about the line. Is there a line that you shouldn't cross? We know that if you say, there's a fella that lives at number 53, we think he's a sex offender, go and kill him. That's probably a line cross. It's a very direct and more an explicit call to action, I suppose. But if you get, and the one at the moment that seems to be talked about is the use of the word Nazi and racist, that if, John McDonnell was saying some horrible things about Nigel Farage, and if you have these different, and some of these people sit currently on the front bench in government who said similar things about Donald Trump. If enough high-profile people throw the Nazi word around and the racist word around, fascist and all of the above, usually without really knowing the full history of those words, but nonetheless, we all take the point of what they're trying to say. If enough people say that, somewhere along the line, some nut job is going to act on it and say, yeah, all I'm doing is killing a Nazi. I'm not killing a normal person. I'm punching upwards, so it's morally okay. Do you buy into that? Because it's the conflict that certainly I have, that, yeah, I want somebody to be able to be as horrible as they like, because it's free speech. I don't want people to be in court or spending 3 years in jail because of something they tweeted. But simultaneously, I can understand the arguments that words can have consequences.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think words do have consequences. I mean, we wouldn't bother speaking unless words had consequences. So I think we shouldn't deny that. I think legally, I'm a fan of the situation in America where incitement has quite a high bar to pass before free speech is clamped down on. So basically, you have to be the person inciting violence has to be in a situation where the person he's inciting is pretty much got in a position to act violently towards someone else, and then that kind of, I think that's acceptable as a charge of incitement. I think the problem, though, is that incitement these days, and especially in somewhere like Britain, has a much, much lower bar in terms of what is recognised as incitement. I mean, Graham Linehan, when he was arrested a couple of weeks ago at the airport, initially the charge was said to be incitement to violence. Then it was fairly quickly adjusted to stirring up racial hatreds, which is a very different thing. Stirring up racial hatreds is basically an encouragement to speak nastily about someone. So I think legally we kind of have to recognise that difference. I think, though, there's a moral and ethical question in these things as well that we all have to consider in terms of how we act. And I think, well, first of all, I think to go back to the point on the Nazis, I think that has become something that is all too often used. People are called Nazis and this, that, and the next thing. And I think that's undoubtedly the case, that adds to the unsavory nature of the public sphere. I don't think legally it should be stopped, but I think morally we have a duty to consider our words very carefully, because as we said before, words do have consequences, and we should engage in proper debate in a civil manner while reclaiming our right or constantly defending our right to speak as necessary and as we please.
And it's a fair point to finish on. Alistair, thank you, sir, for that. Really interesting stuff. Alistair Donald, co-governor of the Battle of Ideas Festival. In fact, where is the line? What is the point where you say, hang on, we've got to just suddenly watch? Here is the line. We have now got this breaking news. The suspect arrested and accused of killing Charlie Kirk has now been identified as Tyler Robinson. Senior law enforcement officials briefed on the matter told NBC News the 22-year-old Robinson is from Utah. That's what we know so far. We await that press conference. This is Talk.
Keir Starmer was sort of adamant in his very legalistic way that all due process had been followed. We have followed the process to the last jot, dot and comma. Every I was dotted and every T was crossed. He never much seems to care about what the outcomes are, as long as the process was followed. But it's now emerging, isn't it, that quite a lot of warnings were flagged up, unsurprisingly, about Peter Mandelson, and those were overridden by the Prime Minister and perhaps by the behest of Morgan McSweeney.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 2 o'clock right here on Talk. We do await that press conference. So that is the latest breaking news. The suspect in the killing of Charlie Kirk has been named as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson from Utah. More details to come. Let's go back to your calls. We're asking the question. We're starting off with Keir Starmer. There's a litany of blunders and errors and bonkers decisions, and really the kind of thread of hypocrisy, I think, is perhaps the most central and the most damning accusation against this Prime Minister, along with ineptitude as well, I think we could safely say. And we say all of this when we hear the news today that our economy is essentially flat, like nothing has happened, waiting lists are up. These are the kind of facts and stats you read out at the end, the fag end of a government when they've been there forever and they just couldn't any longer make it work, and whatever idea they came up with collapsed around them. This is a government that's been there just over a year, kids. Let's remember that. This has all happened in just over 1 year. How long can Keir Starmer hang on for? Lines are open. This is Ian down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian. Just like very quick, like one other bit. You know, I always come up with two. One word that's used without any common sense with a lot of them: genocide.
Mm-hmm.
They spout it around all over the place. They haven't got a clue. And it was funny because the government the other day said there is no genocide.
They did.
Just as quickly as they put it out, they stopped it again because they didn't want to upset a certain people.
Yeah.
Anyway, right, on to my main point. Right, if I remember rightly, didn't Keir Starmer, when all the business with Jimmy Savile, said, no, it was below my pay grade, I never saw the papers on my desk?
Something of that order, yes.
Yeah, and isn't he doing exactly the same thing? Every time one of these things come up, every time one of these... I didn't know.
Yeah, but that seems to be... I mean, I have no defence of Starmer in any respect. I think that the Savile thing, there was much more to that story in that they just couldn't make a case stick. And I think one of the central witnesses, and we're not talking about the hundreds of people we now know about, but at the time this was just a couple of people that had walked into a police station with an allegation, and then I think one of them said they didn't want to any longer report this. And again, not to defend Starmer, but I can understand how that might not have reached the fullness of it, the dizzy heights, although some people counter that and go, you know, if a very well-known person is accused of something, you know, usually the chief would know about it, but it would still not have enabled Starmer to act on it if there was no case that you could reasonably have proceeded with. However, it's the same line, right? It's the same line.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the same thing. It wasn't me. He could actually get Shaggy to do the song for him. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It's actually Lady Starmer. I wasn't in the building at the time.
Yeah.
It was with Ali. It wasn't me. I didn't wear a suit. I didn't wear those glasses. It's the same thing every single time. It wasn't me.
It's an extraordinary... It's a sort of... Maybe if you're a lawyer all your life, you kind of just very effortlessly fit into those kind of stock answers. Maybe that's what happens.
He's a double glazing salesman. It's the same. He does the same pitch every single time. He goes in and he'll sort of do the same interview and do like that. You've got nowhere to run, but he'll do it that way.
I bet you if he sold you double glazing, it'd be single glazing when it was fitted. He'd go, no, that wasn't me. No.
It wouldn't even be double. It wouldn't even be double. It wouldn't even be glazing. You'd actually come and it'll be bricks in the wall because he'd say you don't need that because. My friend Angela, you mustn't pay for a window to
or he would, it could be that, or he would convince you there was a window there. You know, there's really no window there. No, there is a window. Look, keep looking, you'll see the window eventually. Ian, you've been brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Andrew, how long has he got? Afternoon. I know you've been here before on this territory.
Well, we both agree. I believe March will be gone by then. The reality is, though, if you look at it, and a lot of you as commentators can't get your head round it, and neither... If you look at the end of the Democratic Party, it was run by committee. And you can see that there's no leader in this government. It's run by committee. So you look at Blair, he gets the meeting with Trump because he believes that he's going to solve the Middle East because Mandelson is put in position. The only person that would drive Mandelson to be out there was Blair. So you've got a committee running government. And time again, the person that's most perceptive about Starmer is Diane Abbott. She said he doesn't do politics. He was parachuted into a seat. He's no politician. Yeah. And for all her faults, she's correct. March is... We're going to lunch, you and I. I'll buy the wine, you buy the lunch, because he'll be gone by March. That's my bet.
Do they do wine in Five Guys?
No. If you bring Mike Graham, I'm not buying the wine. Oh,
I was going to say, if you bring... Listen, we found out the hard way last time we all went out as a team what happens when Mike's in charge of selecting the wine. It's only when the bill shows up you realise, really? I didn't know which way round to hold the receipt to get the zeros on it.
Yeah, he talks about that. Apparently you went into anaphylactic shock when you saw the bill.
Well, I think it was more Julia, because Julia doesn't really drink wine, interestingly. So, bearing in mind, you know, we're splitting this 5 ways or something, and Julia's going, hang on a second, about 3/4 of that bill, I mean, quite literally, was the wine. Anyway, it did all get paid in the end, and a nice tip as well. Andrew, brilliant stuff. Thank you for that. Yeah, we look forward to that meal. It's interesting how Starmer's position, and I genuinely, the more I think about it, and I thought what Andrew just said about, you know, the Diane Abbott thing and this man doesn't do politics, that's what's at the centre of this. The bit that I just cannot get my head around. Here we are in the 21st century, all right? How many times does somebody have to walk the plank? It's not the original, not the initial offence, but it's the covering up or the lying that kind of gets you. Even Nixon and Watergate, it was the lies that ended the man's presidency. It happens all over the place in politics. We also know that we live in a world where stuff becomes public a lot quicker than it used to. Anonymous voices on social media and whistleblowers and goodness knows what, we've got all of this going on. So if Keir Starmer was told whether implicitly or explicitly that Peter Mandelson continued a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, even once it was known that this man was facing serious charges of sexual activity with minors, and Starmer knew about that at any level, then I think he should be toast. Because bearing in mind, we're dealing with a couple of things here. The integrity of the Prime Minister, the ability to make decisions and all the rest of it. But we're also talking about the very sensitive issue of child sex assault and rape and all that goes with it. And this whole area is high profile across the board. It's high profile in Hollywood, it's high profile in politics, it's high profile because of grooming gangs, the establishment not being honest about what people knew, who associated with who, etc. It's right at the centre. It would, and he's a lawyer, for God's sake. So he can't have looked at it and gone, well, that was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. He's a flipping lawyer. If the word Epstein comes up on someone's job security checks, and you discover that they had some kind of relationship beyond, if you knew him years ago, before he knew he was a wrong 'un, that's a whole different thing. But he knew what was going on. And if Starmer knew that, I mean, Mandelson has told us that he carried on a relationship despite the fact that he knew what Epstein was up against. But if Starmer knew that and continued with the appointment, then the man has to resign. In the same way that he fired Peter Mandelson for the very same thing, if you think about it, but surely he would have to go. That would be outrageous. It's such an area that has been historically high profile, not because of its repugnant and horrendous nature of children getting abused, but the cover-up, the establishment, the web of lies. So you miss that as a Prime Minister and don't act on it. Boy, I mean, this is, the more you think about it, this is explosive stuff. 0344 499 1000. 2:30, this is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. And a reminder, we are awaiting that press conference from Utah. This is over the news that has broken in the last 30 minutes or so that the suspect arrested and accused of killing Charlie Kirk has been identified as Tyler Robinson. The stage is set for the conference. When it happens, we can bring you the detail. We know that law enforcement officials have briefed others, NBC News in particular, that the 22-year-old Robinson is from Utah. So that's the latest. That's the latest we have on that. When it happens, we'll bring you more. Back to your calls in a few moments' time. Stand by for all of that. More comments on the way. Linda says, I didn't vote Labour, but just assumed Starmer would be weak. Big mistake. He showed his true colours over Southport. Lying, conniving, manipulative, corrupt, globalist dictator running the country. He's got to go. Many people feeling the same thing. Elizabeth says, I think our country is collapsing before our eyes. I'm so sad. I wonder if we can ever recover. I have grandchildren to think about. Yeah, we want our country to be picked back up again, don't we? I mean, there is that sense that we're kind of just hanging around waiting for something to happen, and nothing has happened. Ant in Devon says, unfortunately, I fear Starmer will continue limping along. Why? Because Labour MPs know if he resigns or is given a vote of no confidence, who can replace him? And there's the big issue as well. Who could possibly replace Keir Starmer? Well, there's lots of people in your own ideal cabinet who would replace him, but realistically, within the Labour Party, who would replace him? Nick in Winchester says it'll be interesting to see whether the assassination of Charlie Kirk would be considered to be as important as the assassination of Martin Luther King. Trying to get a small grain of positivity out of the incident, it could well be that this proves to be a turning point, no pun, in history, whereby people finally realise the danger of the anti-right movement and steps are taken to squash this thing once and for all. Freedom of speech is vital to society, and we are moving away from it so fast, it is terrifying. Thank you for that, Nick. Now, the government is facing criticism over secret plans to house illegal migrants in student flats. A planning application has been submitted to spend millions to convert a 247-bed property in Leeds. And where one starts, I'm sure others will follow. The public are not allowed to formally object to the plan or make any official comment on it as part of the planning process. Let's speak with Lucy White, Public Policy Specialist. Lucy, good afternoon to you. Can you hear us, Lucy? Lucy has just dropped off, but we're going to get Lucy back. When I first saw this story, by the way, that the 247-bed property in Leeds is going to be converted, formerly as student digs, into a place for migrants, it just... I mean, I live in an upside down... it can't just be me that spots this stuff and people who are listening right now. It can't just be us lot, surely. It's like, hang on, you haven't really solved the hotel crisis if you just transpose people from one big building of accommodation, hotels, to another big building of accommodation, student digs. It's literally the same thing. The same problem exists, the same issue of who people are, social cohesion, the community, the rights of residents. Doesn't change anything. Lucy White is with us now. Lucy, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. Good morning from the USA, where I currently am.
Oh, you're in the USA? Wow, what about that? There you go. Well, nice to have you with us anyway. Listen, Lucy, I mean, what do you make of this 247-bed property in Leeds? I mean, is this the start of things to come in the government's, I suppose, their efforts to try and change accommodation in this very controversial area of housing asylum seekers?
It's essentially a game of whack-a-mole that we're seeing here.
And I think Lucy's line has given up the ghost there. We are going to try and rejig, regroup, I think the phrase is, and get you back on shortly. In the meantime, we'll do some more comments from you as well. And, of course, we are taking your calls on 0344 499 1000. There's a couple of questions out there at the moment, but in particular, how long can Keir Starmer survive is right at the top of the pile. By the way, Andy says, don't mention glazing or windows, Ian, or they'll bring back window tax. It's a very good point. Isn't window am I right? Is window tax how tax started? Is it something like that? Graham Stringer is the only decent Labour man, says Judith. A few people have made that point. When we gave it a discussion last week on who could replace him, and Graham Stringer's name came up time and time again. I think we got you back, Lucy.
Yes.
Hey! You're loud and
Sorry
clear.
about that. Sometimes, we blame the American Wi-Fi system here.
Absolutely right. They're so behind, those Yanks. Listen, great to have you with us again. Anyway, nice to have you on the show. I was just making the point before you came on that if the objective of the government is to deal with the migrant crisis when it comes to, putting people up in hotels, and then you just move people from the hotels, which is a big building of multiple occupancy, and put them in another big building of multiple occupancy, I would suggest, without being a housing or a migrant expert, you haven't really solved the problem.
Exactly. And the main problem is that we don't want any illegal migrants here. The problem isn't that they're in hotels or student accommodation or housing. The problem is that they're here in the first place. The government is playing a game of whack-a-mole, Oh, the hotels didn't work, so let's put them into student accommodation. Oh, that didn't work, so we'll put them on a barge. Or, oh, that didn't work, so we'll give them private housing. The issue is we don't want any of them here. As soon as they arrive in small boats, they should be greeted by the police, detained and deported. They shouldn't even set foot into the United Kingdom.
Well, I think that's rather the point, isn't it? And yet that very simple, quite easy to understand situation is completely lost on this government. When I hear the Home Secretary, the last one or this new one, or even Starmer himself, say, we're going to sort this out, we're going to close these hotels, it's like, not really, because closing the hotels, when people want the hotels closed, it isn't just the building they want to stop you. They want the entire abuse of an immigration system stopped. Moving people elsewhere doesn't do that. In fact, it almost makes it worse in some respects.
Exactly. It makes it worse embedding them into communities. I mean, if you think about students, these are young adults. They could be 18 to 24 or around that age. Why on earth should they be subjected to illegal migrants who we know are typically men? And as I will quote from Charlie Kirk himself, Charlie Kirk said that these migrants are importing insidious values into the West. And Charlie Kirk is absolutely correct. We've seen that these illegal migrants come over here. They are raping our women. We've seen that crime is going through the roof, and they simply cannot be here because they are incompatible with the West.
And we have seen some horrendous stories. And I always think on this particular point, Lucy, that even if the migrants are carrying out no criminality and doing nothing wrong, it still doesn't, because I hear the left always go, well, most of them are absolutely decent. I'm sure they're fine. Let's run with that. I'm happy to have the same argument on that basis as well, because my position will not change, and that is it doesn't alter the irredeemable reality that bringing 55,000 people, count that number, 55,000 people into a country in a year is a crime scene. And I don't mean literally, I mean metaphorically.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a national crisis. It's a national emergency. And any of those on the left that have sympathy for these illegal migrants, they need to understand these are not genuine refugees because they are coming from France, which is not a war-torn country. The only reason they are coming here is because we give them hotels, we give them £49 a week of an allowance. We give them, sort of day trips out to swimming pools, to gyms, bouncy castles, you name it. We're essentially mucks. And what I find very concerning is a lot of the British taxpayers, they say, why do I bother to go to work and pay taxes when this is how my taxes are being spent? The British public never once voted for mass migration. We've always voted against it. And what's tragic is that the main driver behind Brexit, the Leave vote, was immigration. Because we left the European Union, but we did not leave the European Convention of Human Rights. And if you go back to 1950, the ECHR was actually created to protect member states of the Council of Europe, i.e. to protect European refugees. But we have an influx of people from the third world, from non-EU countries, coming over and abusing our system. Enough is enough. We've been speaking about this for years. When will it finally end? What is it going to take? When is the turning point, shall we say, for the UK and our asylum system?
Indeed. And on that point, listen, enjoy the rest of the United States, Lucy. Thank you for being with us. Lucy White, public policy specialist, on that very easy to understand problem that, frankly, this government, they just cannot get their heads around. They cannot go there. They can't work out. Seeing Yvette Cooper, when she was Home Secretary, almost brag about the fact, we are going to close these hotels. We've already got fewer than we did. Well, they actually went up for a bit, but as if that in itself is a mark of progression and recognition of the problem. What we're actually going to do is take these 200 men, don't know who they are, got no idea where they came from, anything at all, nothing. It's nothing about these people. We're going to plonk them into a community in a hotel. And then we're going to close the hotel, don't worry. Oh, great, so you're going to actually deport these people? No, we're going to move them up the road to a student dig. Mate, that's just the same thing, OK? That's the same thing and the same problem. Let's go to Norman in Dartford, reference current affairs and what is going on with Mandelson and Starmer. Norman, what are you making of all of this? Good afternoon.
Well, I think this story has got a long way to run.
Go on.
I think it goes much deeper. Harry was given the job. The business with Savile and the Public Prosecution Service, when Starmer was ahead, and he never heard about it. I can't believe that. He was a very high-profile man at the time, Jimmy Savile. And if you're someone like that, you're head of the department, you would be told about it.
You'd think so.
You'd say you didn't know. It's a dereliction of duty.
You'd think so.
Well, it's got to be in.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The more you start to delve into this Mandelson appointment, and you haven't got to delve that far either, to be honest. You haven't got to be some kind of Columbo-esque sleuth to try and work this one out.
What I really think is funny, that Mandelson's going to do an interview.
Yeah.
Now, he could have done with BBC, Sky, ITV, got an easy ride. What did he do? He goes to Harry Cole. I mean, that's a bright spot to do that, isn't it?
Well, who's going to completely expose him, of course?
Of course it will.
Yeah, and it did. I mean it was that interview, Harry's interview, that went around the world, where we were able to see, in the man's own words. I mean, at least Mandelson told the truth, curiously.
But how much talking did Harry Cole do?
Yeah.
Very little.
We didn't need to.
No, of course he didn't.
He just handed him the rope.
Yeah, I mean, he's a clever man.
Yeah.
For interviewing people.
100%.
And this bloke who's of dark arts is wonderful, and he goes to him.
Yeah.
I think it's all right. He's overrated, mate. He's just a sleazeball.
It could be that. I mean, it could be that everybody has just sort of put this sort of, like we do with captains of industry and other sort of big establishment figures. I always talk about these, these characters that are on 17 different boards of different companies or charities and funds, and that's all they do all their life. They just move on these boards. They trouser 10k from that one and another 25 from that one, and it's how they earn a living. And nobody ever stops and goes, are they actually any good? Are they any good? He was a political operator, apparently, of some note, back in the day. But I wonder now, what are we, 25, 27, 8 years on from when Blair came into number 10? Maybe his seductive powers of brilliance have long deserted him. Norman, love it. Thank you very much indeed for that. Factoid alert. Richard Jackson says the window tax is, which somebody referenced earlier, is where the phrase daylight robbery originated from. Wow, didn't know that. Makes sense. Vern in Southampton. Mr. Trump has already talked about the suspect in the Utah shooting being, or saying, I hope he gets the death penalty. Vern says the death penalty in Utah is by lethal injection or by firing squad. And this one from Matthew in Cheltenham, who says, how is it different that Mandelson kept his friendship with Epstein and Starmer knowingly appointing him as the most senior Foreign Office civil servant? If Starmer had knowledge of the scope of his relationship with Epstein, but still appointed him, he is culpable as Mandelson. Yeah, I literally made that point. That's so true. And should resign as PM. Only problem is that Lammy would become Prime Minister. I can't think of anything worse. Yeah, I mean, he might not, but temporarily he absolutely would. Maybe that's why they put him into place. Can you imagine it? Prime Minister Lammy. Thank you, Matthew, for that. We've got the voice of doom on the way. We are awaiting that press conference. When we get it, we'll bring it to you here on Talk. The time now is 10 to 3.
We've been talking about that for 2 years. You're diverting. You're Clive. You're Lord Soley. I have to stop you. I have to stop you. I'm not. You're diverting from the story. This is a story about the Prime Minister's judgment.
Yes, absolutely, and I'm dealing with it. And I'm dealing with it. What I'm also saying is that this is a very important story. I accept that. You haven't even mentioned the attack on the NATO state. I haven't even mentioned it.
That was yesterday. The attack on the NATO state was yesterday. We talked about that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Frankie says the Charlie Kirk killing coward should be sat on a chair with his family watching. Yeah, and executed, basically. I can see that sense, that feeling that many people would have, given the cowardly nature, as if there's any other kind of nature when somebody takes another one's life. But you take the point. One here from Wayne. It's very bizarre that slimy Mandelson could bring down Keir Starmer, according to rumours. Imagine such a hated person bringing down the most hated person. I'll take it, though. That would be extraordinary set of events, wouldn't it? Kevin's in Dorset. How long's our Prime Minister got, Kevin? Good afternoon.
Well, as Farage was saying, originally 27. I was thinking more like 26 by the start of, but I reckon we've got a couple of days to a week.
Couple of days to a week? Wow. I mean, that would be extraordinary.
Well, the reason I say it is because I'm looking at this from a different angle, possibly.
Yeah.
Mr. Starmer's history, which he's always been praised about and talked about, and he's very happy with, is his legal, human rights, but also head of the justice system.
Yeah.
And that puts him above pretty much everybody's, realism in being honest in life.
Yeah, the bar is clearly as high as it could get, and that's the one he has to. He has to reach that bar every day of his working life.
Yes, and so he's irreproachable in some respects.
Yeah.
What he says is what it should be.
And as Matthew said, so if he knew what Mandelson knew, then why did he appoint him?
Absolutely, and the fact that he came out and supported him to begin with. He's waited for him to resign.
Yeah.
He then sacks him, which shows he categorically knows it's wrong, be it before or after. We now have the evidence from the intelligence agencies on top. There's no way on this earth any Prime Minister does not know about that information.
Yeah.
Therefore, he's in breach of his, forget the Prime Minister bit, he's in breach of his barrister code. So he should be
disbarred. Which he still retains, of course.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he should be disbarred. He should be struck off from being a lawyer and a barrister. He then would have to be removed as Prime Minister. The whole thing is just a domino effect. So to me, that there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
He's hung, drawn, and quartered. And if he stays in office, then the country well, I don't know what's going to happen, because how can any police officer trust him? How can any justice person trust him? Judge? Anyone associated with standing by his side will also be committing an offence because they're aiding and abetting.
That's a great point.
This goes massive.
I absolutely agree. And, other than, either Starmer didn't know, he was never told at that level. The secret services or whoever the hell it is interviewed Mandelson. They knew there was a connection, never found its way onto the desk of the Prime Minister, which is possible, of course, in a weird world it's possible, in which case he has no case to answer. But if he did know, then he has not only committed the same offence as Peter Mandelson, offence, if offence is the right word, but he's done so in an even worse light, as you've just mentioned, Kevin, in that, he's a barrister and the Prime Minister, which sort of triples the impact.
He's party to it. And even if he didn't know, he still is party to it, because he didn't sack him immediately as soon as he
did know. That's a good point. Will he get the benefit of the doubt on that 24-hour period? And I can't imagine that Starmer only found out because he opened up the Sun. He must have come out more. So I'm pretty sure there's more than 1 day's notice he had on this. Listen, it's a great. The more we talk, Kevin, thank you very much. The more we talk about it, the more you realise this is a very real situation of the possibility of a Prime Minister having to walk the plank. Surely, if he knew prior to appointing him, he would have to go. Philip in South Wales. Philip, we might get interjected by that press conference in Utah, but let's see how we do. What have you got for us, Philip?
Yes. Thank you, Ian.
Pleasure.
If Starmer had a brain, he would resign now and get out of it. He's in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
And where is he? Where's he been? We haven't seen him since Wednesday. He's hiding away, trying to make excuses. Where is he?
Maybe he's with Sadiq Khan, because he seems to have disappeared since the tube strike began. No one's seen him either. Maybe there's a little special place they all go to and cry in the corner.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think myself as well that the Labour Party are rotten to the core.
Well, this one is, I'm sure over the years, there's probably been, Philip, some very proud administrations, you know, when the Labour Party meant something, when it had a relevance because it represented the working man, when it came in to sort of, you know, battle against the rich landowning Tories of the 1920s, 30s, 40s and before. There was a reason it was there, yeah? I can't think of the reason now, to be honest.
Yeah, that's right, absolutely.
We're going to watch with interest. Philip, thank you very much indeed for that. If you're watching us on our feed, you'll be able to see there is a press conglomerate awaiting the update on the arrest of the person who it looks as if accused of killing Charlie Kirk. We don't know whether charges have happened. We don't know what the status is of the person they have at the moment, whether there has been a charge or whether this is somebody helping with inquiries. I mean, you get the idea. I'm saying this because that's, you know, all the possibilities. It looks as if they have the person they were looking for. We know earlier we heard from the police and also via the president as well, who made an appearance this morning on Fox News to name the suspect. The killer, or the person accused of the killing, has been identified as Tyler Robinson. This is according to law enforcement, a 22-year-old from Utah. FBI Director Kash Patel and local authorities investigating the shooting are expected to provide further updates. I would imagine that Mr. Patel may well be one of the people that we see on this press conference. I don't know that. Whether this is just local police and local governance, we'll bring you all of that when and as it happens. We are going to cross live, though, to Orem in Utah, which is where this is taking place, and we think in a couple of minutes' time. In the meantime, AJ is in Essex. On Peter Mandelson, AJ, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Sad news about Charlie.
Yeah.
The Peter Mandelson, he's had the ambassadorship taken off him, and he's still being called Lord Mandelson. He should have the lordship taken from him. Anybody who sits in the Lords now, if I was sitting in the Lords now, I'd be disgusted.
Well,
how can he have a lordship?
Yeah, and we know, you know, the fact that he wrote such glowing words to a man who was awaiting trial and all manner of horrendous accusations.
Convicted paedophile.
Yeah.
Convicted paedophile, and he's sending notes. They're like love notes. It's disgusting.
They are like they're like little love letters that you would write. Oh, we love you, we support you, yum yum. Good knows what else. I mean, it's horrendous from start to finish. And of course, you can't unsee this stuff.
Sorry. And if Keir Starmer thinks that me and the rest of the public in this country are going to think and accept that he knew nothing about this,
yeah.
He's living in clay
It's not looking good, is it? It's really not looking good. When did he know? When did he know that the person that he appointed to be the UK ambassador to the United States continued a relationship with a convicted child sex offender? When did he know? And you're absolutely right, AJ, because for Mandelson, how does he carry on? You could, you know, he can barely go anywhere now. I think he's lost a couple of other jobs as well in the meantime, because people will always look at him as a friend of a sex offender who he knew was a child sex offender.
He's been sacked more times than the Manchester United manager. Shocking.
Yeah, indeed. Shocking indeed. AJ, thank you very much indeed for that. AJ in Essex. More comment from you. Dallas Nash says, Epstein notwithstanding, Mandelson was scarcely as white as the driven snow. I couldn't believe he'd been tipped, then ratified as the US ambassador. Wondered at the time if the US would object. Turns out they did. Well, I don't know what in terms of the appointment, what the administration gets to say. I mean, it's up to the UK who the ambassador is, of course, but it's kind of, I can't help but think Starmer, who will say at the moment that he didn't know anything about this, but I think he was so seduced by the idea that the Americans would love Peter Mandelson, that it would be... I mean, it's a curious job, the ambassador role. I'm tempted to say it's kind of like almost like a PR marketing gig in a very glorified, high-profile way. Maybe it is. You don't really carry any power as such in that job. I'm sure someone will give me an argument from that and on that, and I'm willing to hear it. There's probably some quirk where you are in charge of something. But broadly speaking, it's it's a big gig to lose, and it's a big gig to be appointed to. That press conference, we understand, is just kicking off as we speak. Let's cross over now to Utah.
Moving to the podium any second now. I'm trying to see if I can see Kash Patel.
We're just actually getting some introductions from those organising this, explaining who is going to be at the podium to speak. It looks as if there are 5 people, certainly law enforcement there. I would imagine will speak. The FBI, I'm sure, will speak as well. This is an update on the suspect in the Charlie Kirk killing. Here it is.
Governor Cox, FBI Director Kash Patel, and Sheriff Mike Smith. We also have with us Utah DPS Commissioner Bo Mason, Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson, FBI Special Agent in Charge Robert Bowles, and local and federal law enforcement partners. Following the remarks today, Governor Cox, Director Patel, and Commissioner Mason will take questions. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed that roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact name Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact, Tyler, also mentioned that he had changed outfits. I know there's been speculation as well as to the writing on those casings, those bullet casings, and I believe we have that as well. And I'll share that with you now. So the area north of Campus Drive Road where the suspect crossed over, you saw some of that in the video that we released last night, consists of a grassy area with trees on the edge of the UVU campus. Investigators discovered a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a dark-colored towel. The rifle was determined to be a Mauser Model 98 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle. The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices bulges, capital O-W-O, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow," and a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." We are indebted to law enforcement across the state who has worked seamlessly together, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and our federal partners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're grateful for everyone who worked together in such a short amount of time to find this person and to bring justice. I want to thank the public who has been so engaged, reviewing videos, helping us with sending in tips, and helping us get to this point. I want to thank the family members of Tyler Robinson who did the right thing in this case and were able to bring him into to law enforcement as well. I especially want to thank the family of Charlie Kirk, Erica, Charlie's parents, his children. I want us to be thinking of them as we bring justice in this case. They will be involved in that justice. We will be working very closely with them as we move through this process as well. This is a very sad day for our country, a terrible day for the state of Utah. But I'm grateful that at this moment we have an opportunity to bring closure to this very dark chapter in our nation's history. With that, I will now turn the microphone over to the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel.
Thank you, Governor. This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI and our partners are proud to stand here today together to bring justice to the family of Charlie Kirk and honor his memory. I want to express my deep gratitude to President Trump, the Vice President, and the entire White House who have been so incredibly supportive with both resources and just personally to the FBI as a team. They had our backs the entire way, and I just want to express my gratitude for giving us the resources we need to operate in this space to bring this sort of justice at this sort of speed. In 33 hours, we have made historic progress for Charlie. Governor Cox, our partnership has been absolutely incredible these last few days. Our partnership will endure. Your state and local partners, your sheriffs, your DPS community has been unbelievably impressive in the hardest of times. And a case like this cannot be solved, cannot be brought without partnering with your state and local authorities. The FBI has a certain role to play, and we will play that role, and we will lead out for the federal government. But Governor Cox, we are so grateful for your state partnership that led out on this investigation. A little bit of the timeline. Charlie was shot at 12:23 p.m. on Wednesday. The first FBI agents arrived on scene in 16 minutes with chiefs of police at 12:39 and secured the scene. The FBI immediately launched fixed-wing assets. We utilized these assets to transport personnel, specialty technicians, hostage rescue teams. We also utilized these assets to go back and forth from the East Coast and here in Utah to transport forensic evidence and other evidence that will be analyzed and is being analyzed at our FBI laboratories in Quantico and other laboratories, including the ATF. At my direction, the FBI released the first set of FBI photos of the suspect at 10 a.m. local time on 9/11. Then, shortly thereafter, the FBI reward of $100,000 was released at 10:45 a.m. local. Myself and Deputy Director Bongino arrived on the scene at approximately 5:30 p.m. on 9/11. The governor led a press conference last night at approximately 8 p.m. where at my direction the FBI released a never-before-seen video of the suspect. We also released new images to the public of the suspect. And just last night, the suspect was taken into custody at 10 p.m. local time. In less than 36 hours, 33 to be precise, thanks to the full weight of the federal government and leading out with the partners here in the state of Utah and Governor Cox, the suspect was apprehended in a historic time period. And I want to highlight what Governor Cox said. This would not have been possible without you, the media, and you, the public. That's why we went so public, so fast, and we're so transparent, and we're committed to that transparency. The crime scene, just a little bit there. It is a large crime scene. State and local authorities, along with federal authorities, processed that crime scene quickly, and I even had the ability to walk through that crime scene and walk through the steps the suspect took to learn more about what was needed and what resources we needed to bear to create a full picture for the FBI and leadership back in Washington. Furthermore, thankfully to state and local partners, forensic evidence has been seized and continues to be garnered. Forensic evidence has already been evaluated at FBI laboratories in Quantico and state and local authorities here. We will continue to process evidence as we see it, as we collect it, and we will continue to deliver it to Governor Cox and his team. Last night we had a total of approximately 7,000 leads. As of this morning, thanks to your great work, we have over 11,000 leads that were called in to the FBI. And we are running out every single lead that we can. Every one of those leads will be run out. The arrest is a testament to the dedication of good law enforcement being great, and partnerships in law enforcement, which I've tried to highlight as my tenure as the director of the FBI. There is no better relationship for law enforcement than the FBI to partner with state and local authorities, and you've seen it here in these last few days. The FBI Salt Lake field office, along with our offices in LA, Phoenix, Denver, San Antonio, Las Vegas, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, our headquarters component in Quantico, all participate in the FBI. I want to express my deep gratitude to the employees of the FBI, the men and women, the evidence response team tacticians, the special operators, the agents, the support staff. You have done monumental work in historic time when the public, who had a right to demand such an expeditious solving of an investigation, the FBI answered that call diligently, critically important to our nation, and we delivered. And I'm proud to be their leader, and I'm proud to be the director of the FBI. This is very much an ongoing investigation, as the governor said, and we will continue to work with state and local authorities to develop the investigation, to provide them the evidence they need for their ongoing prosecutions, and we will be here to answer every call they absolutely have, as long as it takes, for as long as we need to find and apprehend whatever suspects were involved in this crime. Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
Thank you, and good morning. I would just like to take a few minutes as the sheriff to express my gratitude for everybody who has played a part in this investigation. As you know, it's been a vast, a complicated, and a very, very fast-paced investigation. You're looking at people standing up here who are running on, if they got an hour's sleep in the last couple of days, they're probably lucky. It has been very taxing. It has been so impressive, speaking on behalf of the local law enforcement, to see the cooperation that we've seen in this type of case. Across the state, sheriffs, chiefs, our state partners have stepped up and have come to the call on anything that we needed. Our county chiefs have been phenomenal. Our Utah County Attorney, Jeff Gray, who's standing up here with us, has been phenomenal in leading us through this investigation. I would like to thank the federal government for their resources, their assets. Our local team here, our FBI team, has been extraordinary in helping us work through this and bring this person to justice. Most of all, I would like to thank the public, and specifically, I would like to thank the public who turned to prayers and who turned to positiveness for us. I would like to thank them on behalf of the law enforcement community, because we needed those prayers. That's what we needed to get through this. We needed your support, and you gave it to us. We needed your patience, and you gave it to us. And I would like to thank you for the Kirk family, because that's what they need, is your support and your prayers, and that will get us through all of this. So thank you, everybody, for everybody that have stepped up. We've had such a phenomenal response to this. Thank you.
I also want to give a special thanks to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. Their unwavering support and their commitment to justice is shown true here. And without AG Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the resources they brought to bear, we would not have been able to complete our mission. And I just want to say special thanks. It's an honor to be a part of the Department of Justice.
Thank you again to our incredible law enforcement team who has worked so hard. Sheriff, I got a solid 90 minutes last night, so I'm probably the most well-rested person up here. Ladies and gentlemen, I get the microphone, so I hope you'll permit me a moment just to share a few more thoughts about where we are and how we got here, and maybe a little bit of where we go from here. I don't want to get too preachy, but I think it's important that we, with eyes wide open, understand what's happening in our country today. I've heard people say, well, why are we so invested in this? There's violence happening all across our country, and violence is tragic everywhere, and every life taken is a child of God who deserves our love and respect and dignity. This is certainly about the tragic death, political assassination of Charlie Kirk. But it is also much bigger than an attack on an individual. It is an attack on all of us. It is an attack on the American experiment. It is an attack on our ideals. This cuts to the very foundation of who we are, of who we have been, and who we could be in better times. Political violence is different than any other type of violence for lots of different reasons. One, because in the very act that Charlie championed of expression, that freedom of expression that is enshrined in our founding documents, in having his life taken in that very act, makes it more difficult for people to feel like they can share their ideas, that they can speak freely. We will never be able to solve all the other problems, including the violence problems that people are worried about, if we can't have a clash of ideas safely and securely. Especially those ideas with which you disagree. That's why this matters so much. Over the last 48 hours, I have been as angry as I have ever been, as sad as I have ever been. And It was, as anger pushed me to the brink, it was actually Charlie's words that pulled me back. I'd like to share some of those. And specifically right now, if I could, I need to talk to the young people in our state, in my state, and all across the country. As President Trump reminded me, he said, you know who really loved Charlie? The youths. And he's right. Young people loved Charlie, and young people hated Charlie. And Charlie went into those places anyway. And these are the words that have helped me. Charlie said, when people stop talking, that's when you get violence. He said, the weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. The only way out of the labyrinth of suffering is to forgive. Welcome without judgment, love without condition, forgive without limit. He said, always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. A few months ago, I referenced this last night, Charlie posted to social media, when things are moving very fast and people are losing their minds, it's important to stay grounded. Turn off your phone, read scripture, spend time with friends, and remember, internet fury is not real life. It's going to be okay. He again said, when you stop having a human connection with someone you disagree with, it becomes a lot easier to commit violence. He said, what we as a culture have to get back to is being able to have a reasonable agreement, where violence is not an option. Now, again, to my young friends out there, you are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option. But through those words, we have a reminder that we can choose a different path. Your generation has an opportunity to build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now. Not by pretending differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations. I think we need more moral clarity right now. I hear all the time that words are violence. Words are not violence. Violence is violence. And there is one person responsible for what happened here. And that person is now in custody and will be charged soon and will be held accountable. And yet, all of us have an opportunity right now to do something different. I want to thank my fellow Utahns. You know, this bad stuff happens. For 33 hours, I was praying that if this had to happen here, that it wouldn't be one of us. That somebody drove from another state, somebody came from another country. Sadly, that prayer was not answered the way I hoped for, just because I thought it would make it easier on us if we could just say, hey, we don't do that here. And indeed, Utah is a special place. We lead the nation in charitable giving. We lead the nation in service every year. But it did happen here. And it was one of us. But I want you to look at how Utahns reacted the last 2 nights. There was no rioting. There was no looting. There were no cars set on fire. There was no violence. There were vigils and prayers and people coming together to share the humanity. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe is the answer to this. We can return violence with violence. We can return hate with hate. And that's the problem with political violence, is it metastasizes. Because we can always point the finger at the other side. And at some point, we have to find an off-ramp, or it's going to get much, much worse. But see, these are choices that we can make. History will dictate if this is a turning point for our country. But every single one of us gets to choose right now if this is a turning point for us. We get to make decisions. We have our agency. And I desperately call on every American, Republican, Democrat, liberal, progressive, conservative, MAGA, all of us to please, please, please follow what Charlie taught me. I'll just conclude with words I share often from a friend and author Yuval Levin, who was asked if he was optimistic about our country, and he said, "I'm not optimistic." He said, "I hate optimism." God, that sounds bad. But he said, optimism is a vice. It's this idea that good things are just going to happen. And he said, in the history of the world, good things have never just happened. He says, I'm not optimistic, but I am hopeful. And hope is the virtue that sits between the vices of optimism and pessimism. Hope is the idea that good things are going to happen because we can make them so. I still believe in our country. And I know Charlie Kirk believed in our country. I still believe that there is more good among us than evil. And I still believe that we can change the course of history. I'm hopeful because Americans can make it so. Ladies and gentlemen, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Governor, can you please speak to whether the suspect is speaking with authorities and his demeanor, Tyler Robinson?
You are, of course, listening to the press conference in Utah. We'll go back to those questions in a second. We'll also talk to Michael Graham. The voice you've been hearing, a very powerful and emotionally charged speech from Spencer Cox, the Utah governor. That's who you've just been hearing. Prior to that, Kash Patel, who's the FBI Director General. He started off by saying this is what happens when you let good cops be cops. And he went on to talk about the incredible amount of support, both at presidential level and from the media and from the public, on being able to get this case to this level very, very quickly. Let's go back to the press conference and see what those questions are. Michael Graham joining us shortly.
Discovered that may have radicalized or changed him to prompt him to commit such a horrific.
There's nothing more that we can share at this time.
Governor, you indicated that he had been communicating with a friend on Discord about the gun. Do you anticipate any more arrests?
We do not at this time have any information that would lead to any additional arrests.
Do you believe he acted alone?
Yes, but the investigation is ongoing.
Can you talk more about the family, what they had to say about the suspect?
How he came into custody of police and where he is right now, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, so right now, Mr. Robinson has been booked into the Utah County Jail. You heard the president this morning report that he was taken into custody, that his family and a friend helped to deliver him into custody of law enforcement in Washington County. For those of you that don't know where Washington County is, it is the southwesternmost part of the state of Utah. It's about a 3.5 to 4 hour drive from here, where we are right now, and that's where he lived and where they turned him in.
Please go here. More about what the family is saying about Tyler Robinson.
I can't share any more than what I've already shared. Yeah.
Governor, do you have any details on how he got back to Washington County and how the gun was obtained?
How we obtained the gun was found here.
How the shooter obtained the gun and how the shooter then was able to get back to Washington.
So I don't have much more details on that. We do know that he drove. We had his car here on campus, and then we had his car going south back to the St. George. It's actually the city of Washington in Washington County.
Is he talking with authorities and did he discuss a motive?
I'm sorry? We don't have any information that would lead us to believe that. Yes, in fact, it was just released. Yes.
Is he talking with authorities and did he discuss a motive?
I can't answer that right now.
This is the press conference taking place in Orem, Utah. You've been hearing the voice you've just been hearing there, Spencer Cox, who's the Utah governor. And prior to that, of course, the voice you heard was the FBI director, Kash Patel. Some interesting stuff to talk over on what was said in that. We're joined by Michael Graham, our man in Washington. Michael, good afternoon to you. I mean, this was, just in the words, really, of the FBI director, as well as the Utah governor, a very swift effort from not just law enforcement, but there was thank yous really to the media and the public as well. And we are, you might be muted, Michael. I don't know if it's that, but we are struggling to hear you. Can we hear you now? We will. OK, we're going to work on that. We'll get Michael Graham back with us, who is the voice of Washington. Regularly helps us out with stories such as this. We'll get back to Michael Graham in a couple of moments' time. But that was one of the most powerful of press conferences that you hear. And these things happen, sadly, from time to time, a very high-profile event, and you hear the press conferences afterwards. Michael Graham is back with us. They talked, Michael, there, both Kash Patel and Spencer Cox, just about the swiftness of how this arrest was made.
So I think this is a astonishingly American story at every level. First of all, sadly, America is going through a surge of political violence right now. That's just part of life in America. And whether it's a nutburger in Minnesota shooting a Democratic state legislator, or the trans activist shooting up a school, or now this, we just have to admit that there is a willingness to consider political violence today that wasn't around 10, 20 years ago. And, and so that's true. It's also a story about a family. I mean, this is, it's Utah. There are a lot of hunters in Utah. The gun he used was not some, high-end, gun guy gun. In fact, someone told me that this form of hunting rifle is actually legal in Great Britain, which, as you know, almost nothing is legal in Great Britain. It was a very common weapon. And a young man and his father, and according to earlier reports, including directly from President Trump, who spent an hour talking about this on a chat show this morning, the father and a pastor or a minister of some kind were involved, and they convinced the son to turn himself in. And so all those elements of the moment where we are in America, plus the element, what is it that makes our society work? It's the strength of our family. We're still a country predominated by people with faith. All of those elements are at play. Also, I'm sorry to say, it appears, based on the scant evidence we have, and I cannot highlight this enough, the press conference we just watched, they read what was on the bullets, but we don't know a lot about this guy's background, but he was using what in the States is called Antifa. Do you have that in the UK?
Indeed.
It's far left, crazy progressives who declare anyone to the right of Marx a fascist. And so therefore, by opposing Republicans, by opposing Trump, whatever they claim to be anti-fascist. They have defenders in the mainstream media in the U.S., the New York Times. So it's kind of scary, some voices. And he appears to be part of that. That group has been involved in numerous. If you've seen the videos from Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington, remember a few years ago, the chat of what they call Chaz, they set up an autonomous area in the city, and there were murders going on, and they wouldn't allow the police in. He apparently has been radicalized by that kind of thinking, which is also part of what's going on in America right now, because the conversation has devolved into, if I'm on the left and you disagree with me, you're a fascist and you're Hitler. If I'm on the right and you disagree with me, you're in league with Satan, or you're evil, you're a child molester. And when the conversation is between Hitler and child molesters, you're not going to have a lot of healthy democracy in that climate.
Yeah. And that very much does encapsulate exactly that kind of ideology, the assumption being not unreasonably at this stage that this is exactly what this 22-year-old adhered to. That appeared to be, again, there'll be court cases, there'll be hearings, there'll be more details, but it does seem at the moment that's precisely the hymn sheet from which he was chanting from, as it were. We also hear that apparently, and this is just a report that I'm hearing, that he's the son of a 27-year-old veteran of the Washington County Sheriff's Department, and that would be if that were to be true, I suppose that is another curious dynamic to this.
Yeah, a 27-year veteran, not a 27-year-old.
27, yeah. 27-year veteran, not 27
we
years old.
Americans have our kids young. We don't have them quite
not that
young.
young, indeed.
But so interestingly, so my uncle is a retired deputy sheriff from Washington State, one state over. In that entire region of the U.S., the northwestern states, the communities are so small, the population is so small. It's very common to have volunteer law enforcement and fire people. That's just, I don't know if that's a tradition in the UK, but it's very common. My uncle was actually an EMT, and basically his side gig was he'd help out as a deputy sheriff because it was a rural-ish county, and they needed bodies. And so there are a lot of overlaps. Law enforcement in the US in outside of urban areas is very much a community thing. If you live in a smaller community, the cop isn't just some guy or gal wearing a hat. It's someone you go to church with, or someone whose kids go to school with you, and that's more common. So that's not that much of a surprise. Another thing that's happened here is there's been a surge of people who've been rushing to social media to say, I'm glad Charlie Kirk is dead, or good riddance to him, or whatever. He believed that homosexuality was a sin, which is traditional fundamental church teachings for a lot of religions, and there were gay activists who were glad he was dead, etc. And it's been odd. A disproportionate number of them have been public school teachers. That is, they work for the government. They teach in what we call public schools, and they're stunned to learn that when they post on social media, I'm glad this guy's dead, good riddance, that there's a backlash from their employers, that is the taxpayers. And it's interesting to me, you're in an education environment, like this is what you do. And based on what we know from the outside, I don't spend a lot of time in school, but I have 4 kids, who recently graduated. And, there's a lot of peace, love, and understanding, and, what we might call woke or whatever, but just, feels, a lot of the feels. And yet in this climate of the feels, I'm glad someone's dead. And it highlights a concern that is growing in the U.S., that people are starting to put together the radicalism, whether it's Antifa, trans, whatever, and the kind of education that kids are getting both in K through 12 education and then in college, both of which are dominated by the left in the United States, by Democrats. The unions are overwhelmingly Democrat, et cetera. And people are asking, what are you teaching my kids so that they turn 25 and they won't tolerate debate? We have a new poll just this week. 1 in 3 college students in America say that violence to silence hate speech is sometimes acceptable. It is, and that's a new number. It's the highest number in this poll. They've been doing this poll every year for a few years now. And so we're not ending up with these young people who are embracing Antifa ideas and think that violence might be the result by accident. We are actually programming some percentage of our young people to think this way because these institutions are dominated by these really fringe, outside the mainstream radical ideas about critical theory and on and on.
And what's interesting, they define hate speech as speech they just simply disagree with. So it's an entirely anti-intellectual position to take in the first place. And you're right, we've seen it over here as well. People who are posting jubilation and seen dancing and singing. And you think, well, that's surely it's somebody tells you about it, you go to look for it, and you think, well, obviously they're going to be anonymous. And you think, no, they're not. This is what these people are publicly showing in their bio. You're right, they're the school teacher at St. Mary's High School or whatever. They work in, the social care department of local government. Really?
And the other part of the conversation about this speech that we're having now is the argument that I thought was resolved, but has been apparently reopened. Should people just be able to talk? Now, obviously, Great Britain, you guys have decided no. You actually put people in jail for words, which I will, as a lifelong word guy, talk radio host, writer, the idea that there would be handcuffs involved in look, I say stupid stuff all the time. You want to throw me in the slammer for being an idiot, man, I'm going to do life, no doubt about it. But they're just words. And so the argument is, well, Charlie Kirk's words, because whatever, he opposed pretending that people who say there are girls when they're boys are girls, that he should be punished for that because those words are violence. And this is the actual construct. Words are violence. and therefore violence must be met with violence. And so my violence just happens involves a bullet. Your violence involves a typewriter. It's all the same. And we are having that debate in the U.S. There are, leaders in the culture, in the elites, academia, media, who are saying, no, actually words are violence. And that's, just because this guy went too far, don't dismiss it. And I'm just curious, are you having this conversation in Great Britain that
yes, I mean,
simply saying a word is an act of violence?
Well, there's many, you will know better than me, Michael, many Charlie Kirk videos out there where, because the great clips of Charlie to watch are those where he's just sitting there, he's got a Starbucks in his hand, and somebody walks past and says, I hate you. And he goes, OK, come and tell me. Why do you hate me? And I love those moments. And they often, it takes only a minute or so for the person to say, you make me feel, you make me feel angry, you make me feel bad. Right. And he says, I don't care. I don't care how you feel. This is not about how you feel, but we're now sort of almost unofficially legislating for people's feelings and people's identity. They're the two areas that are sort of central to this curious newfound way of being a human being. I'm going to live my life by my identity, my gender, the colour of my skin, my religion, my sexuality, whatever it happens to be. I mean, this is just nonsense stuff. But it's gained a traction, and as you rightly say, it's not just gained a traction, it's found its way into the annals of academia and places where the very people we just referred to, the teachers, are actually trumpeting this stuff in the classroom.
And I just want to say, it's on the record here, please mark the tape, if you really think that other than like state secrets or something like that, if you really think that people should go to jail for sentences, you're crazy. I mean, you need help. You should find a therapist. There's something wrong with you to see words that way. So let's set that aside. How fascinating then in this case, the governor, you were playing the end of his interview or the press conference, he said that the people of Utah were kind of hoping this would be not a local guy. It's not one of us. And part of that is because Utah is a very, obviously it's the Mormon faith dominates the state. It's a very conservative state and a lot of common sense. They would argue, this is not like Berkeley, California or, Boston, Massachusetts. And yet, even in this very red state, with a guy whose dad was involved in law enforcement, family very traditional, religious connections, these ideas about Antifa and the need to embrace violence and I feel bad, therefore somebody should be punished for my feelings, managed to penetrate to this 22-year-old young man. And so if it's able to get all the way through the barriers of deep religious faith, Mormonism, red state, traditional family values, and in fact, this kid, imagine what it's doing right now at Columbia University, Harvard University, and on and on and on. It's disturbing.
It is indeed. Michael, listen, we leave it there. We are going to, of course, speak again over the coming weeks on this specific issue as we get more detail. Meantime, thank you to Michael Graham, US political commentator, our man on Capitol Hill, just analysing and looking over that. I thought that was an extraordinarily impressive press conference. It was the level of sort of just talking like humans. We don't see that enough over here, do we? The emotion was in there as well as the detail. And I think the swiftness of this, the public information that went out. I mean, there was a manhunt for a very high-profile case. I get that. One comes in here that says, Ian, how impressive and professional. Note the immediate transparency. Getting a swift result puts us to shame. And that was absolutely clear in this case, and it was echoed by Mr. Patel, the FBI director, and Spencer Cox, the Utah governor. More to come, 0344 499 1000. I know Peter Cardwell will pick up the cudgels on this after the news at 4. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk. across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Forgive the vague pause there. There's a lot going on at this end, as I'm sure you can imagine, and a lot of response to that press conference in the US, in Utah, that we've just heard. Betty says, why do I feel like I want to tool up and go to war? These guys are really pulling on all the symbolism. America rides again. Richard says it brought a tear to my eye listening to that. One here from Ian in Northampton. What a fabulous example of leadership being shown by the Utah Governor Spencer Cox. Compare that with those leading this country. Darn right. Richard says, Governor says that there were no riots or violent incidents after the aftermath. Maybe that's because of transparency. Maybe our government can learn in future from this. And one here from Mick in Walsall, who says, watching Trump deal with the situation makes me realise how useless our politicians have become. He's got everything out there. Look how Starmer dealt with Southport. Interesting. Garfield is in Derbyshire. How are you doing?
Hi there, it's Garfield, a.k.a. Gary. I'll just tell you what I've noticed in my lifetime. At one time, if someone were on a ledge or a bridge, they were about to jump, people would shout, go back, don't be stupid. Now they're all stood around saying, hurry up and jump. Well, I've got to get home. I've got an appointment.
Yeah.
And that's how cynical. And it's all down to the parents telling these children, you're absolutely useless. You're not going to do anything you like. You're lazy. Go out and make something of yourself. And it wears them down eventually. They begin to think that they've no worth. And then they see the politicians, they lie one thing after another, and they get away with it. They disappear for a fortnight's holiday, come back, and they're in charge of another fiasco. You've got to set by example, and the whole example we're setting is negative, and it imprints on the mind. So that's all I've got to say.
All right, listen.
Nice to speak to you.
And you too, sir. Thank you very much indeed. That's Gary Garfield in Derbyshire on kids. Joan's in Sunderland. Joan, good afternoon to you.
Hello.
Hi,
I've
what would you like to say?
I've just been watching that interview regarding the shooting in Utah.
The press conference that we heard, yeah.
Yes. And how different it is to what we get. Imagine if the situation at Southport had been conducted anything like that. Things wouldn't have got so bad. It's a very sad time, but they gave it dignity, and I've really felt as if it was really heartfelt and they weren't fed lies.
There was and I know there are obviously not complete equivalencies in terms of what happened, but there is something about the way political leaders, I don't know, this is where the Americans get it absolutely bang on, and I thought the dignified, you could hear the governor holding back some tears at a few times there, and the FBI director as well. They did. It's not as if these guys were robotic and just the tough guys, we got him, that's it, we're going to stick him in jail and put him in the electric chair. It wasn't that. It was also loaded with understanding and a recognition, Joan, that people wanted to hear this information and were entitled to hear this information.
It did. I mean, I'm still quite myself after listening to that. And what a difference. We get told lies. We're still waiting for information from Somerset, Avon and Somerset Police about Glastonbury. We wait months.
Yeah.
And other people are picked up within days. That's the unfairness. And something like what happened in America, we would really appreciate our government, our police forces to have a bit more respect.
Well, I think it comes ultimately from our political leaders, because we don't tend to hear people like Starmer stand up. You know, what they would say at a time like this is, well, we'll allow the investigation to take its full course, and in the meantime, I can't say anything. And that's kind of all you hear. And what you want to hear are words of empathy, understanding. You want the anger reflected sometimes in our politicians. I know, you know, they are there also to command a level of, you know, they don't want violence. They need to tick lots of different boxes. But we get the very opposite over here of what we've just seen in Utah. Joan, you make a great point. Thank you very much indeed. And I share the emotional kind of sense that you got from listening to that. Because, of course, in America, it's a little like you look back to 9/11, which was 24 years ago yesterday when 9/11 happened. And I remember speaking to some Americans who lived in London, and their reaction, naturally, everyone's reaction, was that this was devastating and thousands of people lost their lives and this was awful. But for Americans, this was almost new territory, certainly for a lot of younger Americans of hang on, this is not just an attack on a building and the people, it's an attack on the system. And proud Americans see themselves as a nation not just of people, but a nation whose values they hold very dear. That of free speech, that of security, that of the rule of law. Now, of course, you know, we know America has some grim statistics on crime and the like. We get that. But for those middle Americans who, you know, want to play by the book, their levels of passion that they invest in the American dream, if you like, are through the roof. So when something happens like this is, of course, ultimately about a man, a family man, a father of two, who was shot dead while giving a speech about free speech and the like. But it's also, to Americans, it also cuts through to the very essence of what they stand for, which is why for most people, the few bizarre Antifa-based exceptions, why for most people this cuts across party lines, because, you know, even a good Democrat would share most of those values, a good one. So it goes much deeper than the attack itself. And I think that was reflected by Spencer Cox, the governor, and Kash Patel, the FBI director. Let's get a very quick word in from David in Coventry. David, your reflections, your thoughts, sir.
You're right about the dignity of the press conference in America, in Utah. However, if you had a similar incident in this country, especially with the fact that we now have a massive problem of crime being committed by people who probably shouldn't be here, a substantial number of them, I rather think that if this had been perpetrated in America by somebody who was an illegal migrant who shouldn't have been there, the reaction might have been somewhat different. Yeah. The Americans, people in this country rail against the Americans and having weapons, firearms, and so on and so forth. But the government in America has to be careful, because the permission for people in America to have those firearms was given by the founding fathers to deal with governments that didn't behave as the people wanted them to. Yeah. And that actually is a great strength of America that people in this country don't talk about. That the government have to behave in a responsible manner, because if they don't, the people have the power, if they choose, and enough of them choose, to remove the government.
Indeed. And on that point, David, I have to move. It's a good point to finish on, though. David in Coventry, Peter Cardwell is here on Drive after the news. Afternoon, Peter.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good. What's happening?
Well, of course, we'll have more on the suspect apprehended in the Charlie Kirk case. We'll talk about Keir Starmer under pressure as well. There's been so many people, including Andy Burnham, actually, a potential leadership rival to Keir Starmer, who has come out, endorsed an organisation which has put out a statement very critical of what Keir Starmer has been doing over the last few days. Douglas Alexander as well, the Scottish secretary, has been saying that